This is my first ever video essay. I am hyperfixated on the light novel series No.6 by NO.6. It has taken over my life. I made English copies by hand that I have sitting in front of me, though don't show up on screen. I'm in the process of my third reread, which I'm using in order to make a timeline. And I watched the anime twice in order to make this video essay, and I'm making this video essay, so I kind of know what I'm talking about. I, like many fans, started out watching the anime, and then I ended up reading the novels after watching 8 episodes of the anime, because I heard from someone on Reddit, the most trustworthy resource, that the novels are way better, and they weren't kidding. I would also like to state that I don't think there's anything wrong with liking the anime. I just don't. Also, I don't hate the people who worked on the show. The animators did nothing wrong. Hello to the No.6 fans of the world, and hello to the non-No.6 fans of the world. I hope you're doing well. I am not going to hide the fact that I do not like the anime, and I might be quite harsh on it. If this ruins your enjoyment of the show, sorry, but I hope it inspires you to go read the novels. Even if you haven't seen the show, go read the novels, and go do that now actually, so I don't end up spoiling you on anything. Then come back and watch this. My plan was to go through and explain every single change the adaptation made that I caught, and then I realized that would put immense emotional strain on me, and I probably wouldn't result in a very entertaining video. So instead, I'm going through most of the changes they made that I have serious thoughts on and feel are worth analysing. Obvious spoiler warnings for volume 1 through 9 of No.6 and for the entirety of the No.6 anime adaptation, and also for the final episode of Banana Fish, strangely enough, but that one's just like a blink and you'll miss it comment. By the way, I don't know if you can tell in my voice, but I'm sick. Also, the rest of my family is sick. I got them infected with the plague. So if I'm coughing a lot, or if you hear other people coughing in the background outside my room, sorry about that. I think I should provide a brief overview of the story and the characters for those who don't know the story or just need a little reminder. The story is about a corrupt city-state, disguised as a utopia called No.6, and a mysterious illness that has popped up in the city, causing people to age many years and die almost instantaneously. The city is surrounded by a wall, one that's very hard to get out of, that separates all the residents of No.6 and from everywhere outside of it. Throughout the story, we follow Shion, a privileged, naive, and very kind boy who grew up in the city but flees to a poor area outside of No.6 called the West Block, after he is unfairly accused of a murder he did not commit. We also have Nezumi, our second main character, who is cold, harsh, sarcastic, and has grey eyes. He grew up outside No.6 and has the goal to burn the city to the ground because of the atrocities that it's committed. We also have some side characters like Inukashi, the information seller, and Karan, Shion's mother, who I'll be bringing up as they appear and matter. Some of these characters have their own arcs and stories that also get heavily changed, but I'll skip past their stories and only focus on Nezumi and Shion for the sake of everyone's sanity and time. Just know that both these characters and a few others had stories that were both equally botched in the anime. I'd like to go by episode and talk about it like that, but there'll be a lot of overarching themes I'll be coming back to. Anyways, time to be annoying for however long this video ends up being, which I'm guessing will be a very long time. Episode 1. We open in the same way we do in the novels. A 12-year-old Nezumi is in a tunnel with a bullet wound in his shoulder. In the novel, the tunnel is small and dark, and it's a moment of relief for him, so he can breathe and figure out how long he has until he faints from blood loss, and what the appropriate course of action is. In the anime, he's actively being chased by men with guns through the tunnel. It is quite large, and then he hits a dead end at the tunnel. There are a couple of things that I want to point out. A. Nezumi's in a really bad spot in the novels, a few hours away from death, and he almost gives in to death. It shows how difficult perseverance can be, something that shows up a lot in the story, and it establishes a sense of urgency. Here, even though he's actively being chased, he has the energy to run away. We don't get to see his personality while he's dying, because he's too busy running. There's a theme that continues throughout the episode. In the novel, when he's leaning against Shion's bed, about to fall asleep from energy exhaustion, he's just sitting there normally in the anime. B. We don't get to see Nezumi's thought process due to a lack of internal monologue and narration. The anime fails to give the immediate character establishment that the novel does. You just get thrown into the action with a character you don't even know yet. Most importantly is actually C. The portrayal of brightness as a good thing in this specific shot. He's gotten to the light at the end of the dark tunnel. Except in the first paragraph of the novel makes a point of telling you that Nezumi likes the darkness, and he hates the sunlight, which contrasts against the bright and hospital-esque in number 6, and his hateness of the darkness is something that comes up a lot throughout the story. When similar problems come up later in the anime, I'll probably just skim by them. Something like these are very minor, the scene lasts less than a minute, and there are much bigger issues to talk about. I just want to illustrate how even a change that seemed small can make a big difference, and it is very clear that Studio Bones lacked a lot of intention when it came to what to change and what to keep. Next, Shion is shown in school, something we only see in flashbacks in the novels. It takes a scene that's a flashback and puts it in the beginning, not necessarily a bad thing, but it takes a bit away from the main purpose of the episode and the first chapter of the novel, which is to establish the world building of number 6 and the characters of Nezumi and Shion as two protagonists. The students are all part of a special program. The city of number 6 grants children who are deemed very intelligent and their families extra privileges and rights in order to ensure a perfect learning environment so that they can grow up to be adults who can support the corrupt system and government through science. Shion is one of these children, and so he lives in a very nice house with lots of nice things and is in a super advanced class. During class, Shion is shown zoning out and daydreaming, which at first glance seems very normal for his character, to those familiar with the story. Other characters get irritated at him at how much he gets lost in thought, but that is after the time skip. For context, the first episode/first chapter takes place on September 7th, 2013, on Shion's 12th birthday, and the rest of the story after that takes place 4 years later. During the first chapter, he gets lost in thought when eating his birthday cake and drops his spoon, and at this moment, his mother Kalan asks if something is wrong. "That's rare of you, Shion, spacing out like that." The scene was included because it tells you that in the majority of the series, when he's spacing out, it is out of the ordinary for him. Whatever he is thinking about must be very important to him. So by having him zone out here, it alters his character, it makes him flatter. He's no longer someone who changes because of the world around him. He was someone who didn't zone out before, but because of the world around him, he changed to become so. He's just always that way here. And B, it makes the things he thinks about seem less important. While in class, he's just daydreaming. Imagine turning into a bunch of sakura petals and blowing away in the wind. In the novel, he gets lost in thought, thinking about his friends, if they're doing okay, how to solve problems, and confronting his own flaws. By having him daydream here just for the sake of it, it takes away the importance of the things he thinks about. I forgot to open the blinds. Now you can actually see, but now it's too bright. Good middle ground? Good middle ground. Shion spends about 5 minutes in the beginning of the episode spending his birthday with his friend Safu and her grandmother, who raised her because her parents are dead. Just know that these characters exist for now. I'll skip most of what happens here, as this scene is an anime original, but there are 2 things I feel are worth mentioning, both relating to Safu and Shion's relationship. And you know what? They're both things I think the anime did well. I have positive things to say about it. Bet you weren't expecting that. The first is that Safu mentions a moment that happens as a flashback in the novels, where Safu wore a sweater her grandmother knitted for her, and even though everyone else in the class made fun of it, Shion complimented it. In the anime, they have Safu's grandmother knit a similar sweater as a gift for Shion's birthday. It's cute. It also sets up something that happens later in the episode. No notes. The second is that when Shion is at the front step to go back to his house, as he was at Safu's, Safu kisses him on the cheek. It establishes that Safu has a crush on Shion, something you won't learn until the second chapter in the novels, and it also has some cute dialogue. It also shows Shion being oblivious to social interactions and the meaning behind them, a theme that is huge in the novels, but sometimes missed in the anime. Now, I don't only have good things to say about this moment. I think it does mischaracterize Safu a bit, in that from some moments in the novel it's clear that for many, many years she was waiting. She was waiting for Shion to make the first move. She's a lot more reserved and less confident in her decisions. I'm honestly not that bothered by this change. She's not one of the main characters, and there are other character traits for more important people that they butcher way more. After my brother told me to, I feel the need to include that in my notes I have a timestamp and then written down windmills with 3 question marks. What I didn't realise when I took that note is that Nezumi is sitting by the windmills. Somehow. They never explain how he escaped the tunnel when there were bars, well, barring the exit. I wasn't expecting to be talking about continuity errors in this video, but here I am. Next we go to what is the second scene in the novels, happening right after Nezumi's in the tunnel. Shion sticks his head out his window during a hurricane and screams. Then Nezumi comes into the window all threatening. Shion searches his wound and even shares some food and hot cocoa with him, despite learning on the news that Nezumi is an escaped and violent criminal. The scene is pretty true to the original, but some stuff did frustrate me. For example, Shion offers to let Nezumi sleep instead of Nezumi requesting to use Shion's bed, which she does in the novels. What can I do about the sunlight? I figured it out. Hopefully, the sun doesn't change, even though I know it will, and I know I'll have to adjust this again. More importantly, both we, the audience, and Shion notice a red scar on Nezumi's back. This is something we are not supposed to be introduced to for a very long time, and I'll be talking about more later. We are 6 volumes into the novels when Nezumi reveals his scar, and both we, the audience, and Shion are really surprised. We're surprised that we never knew. We're surprised that we've known this character for so long, and we somehow never found out. And we never found out because Nezumi is secretive. He doesn't tell people stuff just for the sake of it, and so it's very much not within his character to accidentally let someone see. It's also not within Shion's character to just let this be. Shion is incredibly inquisitive, and it's a big part of his arc throughout the novel is to not just ask someone whenever he wants to know something, but to figure it out himself. There really isn't a reason to show the scar here other than foreshadowing, but the foreshadowing seems pointless when it requires both our protagonists to act out of character for us, the audience, in order to receive it. Anyways, I'll talk about this later when it comes back up. Though, I would like to mention that the reason Nezumi's scar is seen ties back to something I mentioned earlier. Remember how Safu gave Shion a sweater? He put it on his bed when he got home and then got kind of sidetracked by the blood-soaked intruder in his room. After fixing the wound, Shion suggests Nezumi borrow a shirt because the one he was wearing is torn and covered in blood and dirt. So, Shion lets him borrow the sweater Safu gave him because it's right there on the bed. So, Shion sees a scar when Nezumi changes shirts. The reason I bring this up is because in the novel, Shion doesn't get a sweater from Safu, so he instead lets Nezumi borrow one of his shirts he already had. But with this change, it has a cool metaphor to it. Safu is in love with Shion. She gives him her affection. She gives him a sweater. And by the end of the story, Shion is in love with Nezumi. I know, gay people. He gives him his affection. He gives him a sweater. If intentional, I really like this. I wish as much thought was put into the rest of the show as was here, because moments like these are really meaningful and offer a lot of room for character analysis. There's a part of Nezumi and Shion's conversation that gets cut out of the anime, and I want to talk about why I like this conversation and why it's so important. Nezumi, in both the novel and anime, asks if you petri dish elites always have no sense of danger, in reference to the fact that Nezumi is an intruder who threatened Shion and Shion helped him. In the anime, Shion is at a loss for words. He doesn't know what to say and kind of stammers through an answer about how he does have a sense of danger before being cut off by Nezumi. In the novels, he instead says, I do feel danger, and fear too. I'm afraid of dangerous things and don't want anything to do with them. I'm also not naive enough to believe that someone who comes into my second floor window is a respectable citizen. This is one of the many, many examples of whenever Shion gets to say something funny, or cool, or sly, or wry, or sarcastic, it gets taken away. Even though he isn't nearly as sarcastic as Nezumi, the king of sarcasm, he is still quite a bit. But the anime doesn't seem to like that fact. it also takes away a lot of my favorite interactions between the characters. Nezumi and Shion banter all the time. They make a lot of jokes and they're always really fun when they're in scenes together. But the anime cuts out so much of their banter and positive interactions that their relationship is left boring and confusing. So it's left unclear as to why they like each other at all, because they don't have any chemistry anymore. After Shion has his line about danger, Nezumi asks a question. Then why? Why was Shion helping this intruder? And here Shion does kind of stumble through his answer, even in the novels. If you were some big, aggressive man, I would have set off the alarm right then and there. But you were short, and looked like a girl, and was about to fall over, so I decided to treat you. And he trails off, and he only says the next bit in his head. And your eyes were a strange colour I'd never seen before, and they drew me in. But he won't say his thoughts out loud, because that's lame, and he's an embarrassed preteen. So instead he says, and I wanted to see what sewing a vessel was like. Nezumi's captivating grey eyes are fun to joke about, but they are also an extremely important and consistent thing throughout the story. At any moment when Shion is afraid or confused, happy too, at any moment you will find Nezumi's eyes. I think that Shion's constant eye contact really provides an interesting space for analysis. Even when Shion cannot bear to look at the world around him, the pointless suffering, he always has Nezumi's eyes as a grounding place. Also, as they say, the windows are the eye to the soul. Shion is very vulnerable and very honest, and he wants Nezumi to be the same way. He makes eye contact in order to peer into Nezumi's soul. Nezumi doesn't like being vulnerable or honest, and he does a pretty good job of not being those things, except when it comes to the eyes. He can try his best, but he cannot fully hide himself from Shion. Oh my god, why is it getting dark again? The anime cuts it out, so all the character depth and interesting relationship dynamics in relation to eyes are gone. Not even only eye contact, there are a bunch of other eye-related character dynamics I could talk about. The anime just doesn't include any of them. I'm hiding in the depths of hell. If I'm as white as a ghost... If I'm as white as a ghost, you'll just have to deal with that. I'm getting sick of changing these curtains. When Nezumi asks why Shion was helping him, what Shion instead says is this.
そりゃ君がチビで女の子みたいで怪我をしていて今にも倒れそうでそれにわからない
And I know internal monologue is removed for a reason. I'm glad they didn't have a narrator, and kept a lot of the internal monologue incredibly minimal. However, when you are adapting a piece of media that has a lot of narration and a lot of internal monologue, you must figure out an effective way to communicate the information that comes out of those cut lines in a way that flows nicely. The anime just doesn't. It either turns thoughts into dialogue when those important they stay thoughts, or just cuts out the information altogether, which totally alters so many of the character motivations and arcs. For someone as secretive as Nezumi, for example, it's important to be able to understand his thoughts and motivations while still keeping those thoughts to himself. Without the internal monologue, you just don't have the internal conflict, and without the internal conflict, you don't have the same characters. You don't have interesting characters. Anyway, in both the anime and novel, the scene ends with Shion going like, "Oh, you have a fever. You're really hot. We should fix that." And then Nezumi essentially being like, "Nah, it's fine." And I quote, "You're warm too. Living people are warm. Remember that line. It will come back later." And then they fall asleep on the bed. Shion wakes up and finds his shirt, his emergency medical kit, that he used to sew Nezumi's wounds, and Nezumi himself are gone. End of episode 1. I'm going to be doing these little intermissions in between each episode to talk about stuff that won't work in other sections. So, you may know that this is not the only adaptation of NO.6 that there's been. There's been a manga publication from a little bit before the anime to 2013, and also a musical adaptation that came out in 2024. I've read the entire manga and watched most of the musical, and they are both better adaptation than the anime. I highly recommend them. Also, the musical, which is 3 hours compared to the anime's about 3.5 hours, got way better character development and a much better story, while still changing and cutting lots of stuff for time. The anime being only 11 episodes is no excuse for messing up the characters so much. I still wish it was longer. It would have been way better if it had been like a 25 episode series, actually had time to get into the characters and plot. Just think that they could have kept the characters accurate in the stuff they didn't cut. Episode 2. So, 4 years have passed, and Shion is now 16. He goes to his job working with maintenance at a park, and he and his coworker see that a man has died by a bench. They go to him and see the dead guy is very old and very rotted, despite not having been there only like half an hour ago, and they're confused. Shion suspects something is up in the novel because the guy wants to complete rigor mortis in less than an hour, and he can also see a green stain on the neck that definitely wasn't there before. In the anime, he actually sees a little creepy crawly move around in the stain. Yikes! Then he goes and gets lunch with Safu, and they talk after the guy gets picked up by the local authorities, or like ambulance or something. Important people who can deal with dead bodies. In the novel, he talks with Safu about the dead guy at work, and it's really cool to see the characters' thought processes while they work through how he died and decayed so quickly. This is, of course, cut. Because, as you will find throughout this video, pretty much any time Shion does something smart or useful in the novels, it's cut. It's a really terrible choice to remove Shion's intelligence, not only because it makes him a less likable protagonist, because he doesn't do as much, it also doesn't make sense from a world-building perspective. Shion lived in a great big house with lots of stuff because of his intelligence, because the city rewards those who are smart. So it doesn't make sense to remove Shion's opportunities to show that he is intelligent. In both the novel and anime, this scene establishes that Safu got accepted into a study away program in a city called Number 5. Yeah, there are only 6 cities in the world and they're all numbered, don't worry about it. And she'll be gone for 2 years. This will come back later. Stay tuned. They talk a bit about Shion's hopes and dreams. We also learn that after he housed the escaped convict, Nezumi, in his house, he was deemed unfit to make rational decisions and was removed from the special program he was in for studying. This also got pretty much all of his rights removed. Safu doesn't know about Nezumi and asks why Shion lost all his privileges, and Shion says he doesn't want to talk about it. They cut out a line I really like that comes after that from Safu, but I'd love for you to tell me. This line reflects Safu to Shion to Nezumi in the same way the sweater does. Throughout the series, Shion desperately wants to learn about Nezumi, just because he would love for Nezumi to tell him. It is a minor line that has some nice significance, and it sucks that so many lines that would be so easy to include and don't take long get cut. It's quite explicit that Safu sees Shion in the same way Shion sees Nezumi, and it's such a beautiful and eventually heartbreaking aspect of the character dynamics. In the novel, we get some narration that explains that Shion doesn't regret what he did. He misses the privilege, of course, but, and I quote, "Even if he had the chance to return to that night, he would have done the same thing. He would have taken in the wind and rain and the intruders that came with it." He doesn't regret it. And he can't explain why he lost his privilege to Safu because he can't figure out why he doesn't regret it when he logically should. And in the anime, because they can't get this through narration, they tell us by having Safu explicitly say to Shion that he is a different person from 4 years ago because he is able to live without regrets. And firstly, no. As far as we know, Shion hasn't really had any changes that would make him regret it then and not now. I actually think he is the same person. Secondly, why would Safu think that he doesn't have any regrets? She has no reason to know that. And lastly, she shouldn't even think that there is anything to regret. She doesn't know why Shion got taken out of the special course, and doesn't know if it's his fault or not. The dialogue is telling instead of showing, and it also doesn't make sense on multiple levels. Have Shion get lost in thought. I know it's not great for a TV show, but sometimes it's simply necessary. There's my evil cat that I'm stroking, like an evil villain. I do not know what I'm doing. Anyways, they go to the train station, and Shion casually asks when Safu is leaving for her exchange trip. It's apparently in 2 days. Safu is like, hey, can I ask something of you? What does Safu want from Shion? Oh, I see. In the novel, this is a painfully awkward scene. There's also hysteric, and I love it. It also establishes through natural dialogue between the characters that artificial insemination needs permission from the city, and also, getting permission would be easy. The city encourages artificial insemination between people who possess excellent DNA and superior skills. Do you know what that sounds like? Eugenics. Yeah, this number 6, the city, not the story, may or may not be doing eugenics. And honestly, I would personally say they are. It's a very nice, natural way to show how horrible the city is in ways that even the characters don't realize are issues. The next page or so is very awkward in a very fun way. Shion is deeply confused and vaguely irritated, and Safu keeps beating around the bush as to what she's actually asking him. And then Safu mumbles something. She admits what she's actually asking. Remember how I started this section with in the novel? How about we take a look how the scene plays out in the anime?
精子聞こえた？あなたの精子が欲しいの。
サフ、
セックスしたい。
Huh. I remember that thing I said about Safu beating around the bush? Oh, the dialogue before Safu admits she wants sex is really good at establishing the city's problematic approach to reproduction. Guess maybe that stuff wasn't that important? Yeah, this scene makes Safu look like an insane weirdo instead of an awkward teenage girl. She doesn't have the confidence to be so loud and honest about what she wants so immediately. She doesn't even mumble the line. The characterization is awful, and we also lose the subtle world building. Anyways, she gets rejected. They talk a little more, and as Safu walks away, Shion says this. Your exchange is in 2 years, right? When you come back, I'll ask this time. Safu clarifies. If I want to have sex? Yeah. Oh, wait, sorry, that was in the novel. What did Shion say in the anime? When you come back, ask me again. Huh. That's strange. I feel that it kind of takes away Shion's autonomy in this situation. Shion won't be capable of asking a girl out, I suppose. He can only ever respond to prompts that others give him. It just feels like an unnecessary change, but one that alters his character a lot. The main character is typically someone who makes a lot of choices, and number 6 is no exception. But throughout the anime, it just feels like the story is happening to Shion, rather than him being an active participant in it. Anyway, Safu begins to leave, and we meet back up with the novel. A rat runs by her feet, and crawls up to Shion's shoulder. Spoiler, this rat is a robot. The robot whispers into Shion's ears the words, still a natural. It's dun dun dun, Nezumi's voice. The still a natural is a reference to something he said in the first chapter/episode. I'm realizing that I'm fidgeting with my deodorant. I should probably find something more normal to fidget with in the video. Anyways, the next day, we see Karan, Shion's mom, conversing with a man named Yo-Ming and his niece Lily, who frequents Karan's bakery. Oh yeah, Karan runs the bakery. They cut out a lot of stuff with Karan. In the novel, she has multiple chapters from her perspective, and is actually one of my favorite characters. So I mean, they all are really. She isn't that important in the anime, and neither is Yo-Ming or Lily. So I'm gonna get some quick stuff out here, and then maybe never talk about them again? Not sure yet. So Yo-Ming and Karan should not have met yet. They meet in volume 3 of the novels, and the scene they meet is really good, highly recommend. Also plot relevant that they meet during the course of the story, but the anime doesn't care if something was plot relevant or not, they'll change it anyway. Also, Lily tells Karan a secret in the novels, that her mama, Renka, is pregnant. Lily's gonna be a big sister, and Yo-Ming tells her off. She shouldn't go revealing mommy's secret like that to people. And yet, in the anime, he just straight up tells Karan herself. He also adds on, the father isn't around anymore. In the novel, Zdenka's first husband has died, but she remarried to a man named Getsuyaku, who is the father of the unborn child and Lily's stepfather. He's also a very plot-relevant character, who we even get to hear the internal monologue of once or twice. I quite like him. I guess the anime just killed him off. Sorry, Getsuyaku, better luck next time. Anyway, Shion goes to work, and his only co-worker, Yamase, says that a young lady who was the wife of the man who died in the park yesterday came by because, her husband died. Apparently, they were only 3 years apart in age, and he was only 31. Interesting, because he was very clearly an old man. Shion suggests that the government is up to no good, and it's their fault, which upsets Yamase. He's basically like, dude, you can't say that, we'll get in trouble. But suddenly, he begins to crumple to the ground. He ages rapidly and dies. Dark stain spreads on his neck and something comes out of it. What is it, a wasp? A wasp came out of his neck. In the anime, Shion just stares, shocked and scared. Like any normal person would, which is actually starkly different from the novels, because if Shion is one thing, it is not normal. Shion does panic and he calls for medical attention, but there's really not much he can do for Yamase. So he studies. He analyzes every symptom, the order they present in, the time it takes for them to present. As my father pointed out when I was info dumping to him about No.6, the story values knowledge a lot. Shion especially values knowledge. They live in a society that ranks and values people based on their intelligence, their ability to acquire and apply knowledge. Shion's very first reaction to Yamase dying is to try and learn as much as he can. Throughout the story, Shion is very inquisitive. He asks questions every chance he gets. Knowledge is a major theme in the story, especially when part of the dystopia is living under a government that censors and hides information from its people. It's extremely frustrating that the anime ignores knowledge as a theme, especially when it's one of the main themes. It won't be bad if this was the only theme they ignored, but the anime doesn't really have any of the same themes or messages. Then the wasp comes out, and in both versions, he passes out from shock. When he wakes up, people from the security bureau are there. They're basically the police. They ask him a few questions and take him to a car. Oh no. In the novel, Arashi, a man from the security bureau, accuses him of murdering Yamase. But in the anime, it's just of discontent of the administration that he's accused of. Sure, he is discontent with the administration, but why would Arashi admit that would get Shion arrested? Keep your cards close, dude. If you're trying to take people to jail quietly for not liking your government, you shouldn't announce that not liking your government will get you sent to jail. Anyway, Shion realizes he's being taken to the correctional facility, a pretty much inescapable prison, which is also the place that Nezumi escaped from. In the anime, he gets really upset and loud, instead of the overly calm and sarcastic way he speaks with the men from the security bureau in the novels. You seem rather calm about it. I hope you do understand exactly what kind of a situation you're in right now. Almost too well. Aren't you calm and collected in spite of that? I'm a natural. A what? A natural. I've been told that by someone before. That I'm a natural and not getting it. What an icon. And of course, this dialogue is cut, because Shion isn't allowed to be an interesting character with a personality. He just needs to be a cute little guy for the female audience to latch onto. Anyways, Nezumi comes to rescue him. They do a bit of escaping, and Shion has to throw away his ID so that he can't be tracked, but it also means he can never go back to the city. There's a part during the escape where Nezumi is driving a car and Shion is staring at him. Nezumi has the fun question of admiring my good looks, which is both helpful in establishing his many wry remarks and the fact that he is attractive. In the adaptation, there's a place with him just asking, why? Nezumi's personality is also heavily removed. Anyways, Shion responds, no, I've just noticed that you've gone taller. So, have you noticed? What? I'm taller than you. Lies. I like this scene. It really helps paint the picture that these characters are kids. They're 16. Teenagers argue about who's taller. I argue with my friends about who's taller. Also, fun banter. I like fun banter. Shion and Nezumi don't really feel like teenagers in the anime. Neither does Safu. They're so serious and just never have fun and act like kids, which again makes them less interesting. The main reason I mention this scene is because Shion's refusal to admit that Nezumi is taller than him is a consistent thing throughout the story that the anime changed multiple times for some reason, so I want to give context to when that happens. They end up having to swim through sewage water in order to get to wherever they're going. In the novel, once they get out of the water, Shion just stands there exhausted, unable to move. And I quote, "It's a little early for bedtime," Nezumi quipped, but his breathing was laboured as well. This is one sentence, but it is one sentence that is good at showing Nezumi's personality, his pride, and his refusal to admit that he is not always perfectly capable. Traits of his that we see throughout the story, and we also see him overcome in some ways. In adaptation, he isn't tired at all. It isn't a big deal. Frequently in the anime, he just is perfectly capable. It makes him feel more like a character and less like a person, when his flaws are purely in disposition and never physical capabilities. Also, even his many and immense flaws in disposition are extremely downplayed, something you better believe I'll be talking about later. Anyways, the place they are escaping to is the West Block, an extremely crime-ridden and poor region outside of the city. It's the slums. And that is the end of episode 2. This show loves to rearrange the order of events, and so far nothing major has been changed, but episode 3 is when that stops being the case. I was originally going to try and explain everything that they changed, the order of and how it messes stuff up, but I've since realized that would make the video at least 20 minutes longer, very conservative estimation, and 20 minutes boringer. So I will only bring up changes to the timeline if I can either consolidate my thoughts heavily, or if it's very important so I have to talk about it. Because of this, I will mostly be talking about stuff that was completely cut or changed in a way other than timeline, but I will occasionally note that whatever I'm talking about took place at a different time or place. I considered making a timeline of the anime to go along with my timeline of the novel, and what chapters of what volumes each thing happen in, but that would require watching the anime and taking more notes on it than I already have, something I wouldn't do unless you paid me. On to episode 3. We are in Nezumi's home in the West Block. It is an underground library vault filled with books and books. Nezumi is in the bath because, they went swimming in sewage. Nezumi seems to have 3 pet mice, and Shion realizes that one of them wants him to read to them, so he does. Nezumi comes out of the shower, and for some reason he's not wearing a shirt. Dude, do you, mister, I don't want anyone to know anything about me, simply not care if Shion sees a scar on your back? Even if he doesn't care, he simply doesn't have a reason to not be wearing a shirt. There's no narrative benefit to having Nezumi shirtless. There's a moment where instead of Shion not being able to remember the book his mother read him as a child, he remembers it as The Happy Prince by Oscar Wilde. It's not an inherently bad decision, but I was a little confused as to why it was included. I had never read The Happy Prince before, so I checked it out from my school library. Nezumi quotes it, and then says, "It's a story about the hypocrisy and self-satisfaction of humans that know not true sorrow." He's not wrong, but I did feel that there were also large themes of self-sacrifice and helping those who need it even if it hurts yourself. And then I realized that is actually good character building. Nezumi is very anti-helping people and pessimistic, so even if it didn't hit me immediately as hard as, say, the Little Mermaid reference in The Summer Hikaru Died, I do still think it was a harmless choice that had thought put behind it. Yay, I have something good to say about the characters. Savor that phrase because you won't be getting much of it. Where in the novels Shion takes a shower that has terrible water pressure, but he really appreciates it anyway, it gets changed to a warm bath in the anime. It feels odd because it paints a nicer picture of the West Block, one that continues not to be portrayed as harshly in the anime as in the novels. When Shion stays in the West Block and doesn't miss his privileged life in NO.6, it's less impactful because the West Block just seems kind of grungy, not properly impoverished. Also, in the bath, there was shown a small mark on Shion's neck, similar to the one that spread across Yamase's neck when the wasp came out. Interesting. We were actually shown this mark at the end of last episode, and Shion didn't notice it then or now, which is annoying considering he does notice it in the novels. He remembers the way Yamase had scratched his neck a few moments before the aging, but brushes it off because he has bigger priorities right now, and he tries to convince himself he's overreacting. In the anime, having him not notice it at all, despite showing the audience twice, just makes Shion seem really unobservant, which is even more annoying because Shion's a very observant character. Nezumi has a monologue where he talks about how useless Shion's love for his mother is. He says it's all baggage that needs to be tossed away for safety. The anime cuts the line, but there's a point where Nezumi asks Shion if he has an Oedipus complex, and that's very funny. Also, now that I say it, it's also very much the kind of reference that Nezumi would make. I'm not upset about him cutting it in any way, really, but I thought it was worth mentioning. After he says this, Shion in the novel calls Nezumi out because he literally just saved Shion's life. Like, so much for focusing only on yourself. Huge hypocrite move. Nezumi's a big fan of those. Nezumi grabs his collar and hisses that he owes Shion a debt from when he saved his life 4 years ago, and is merely paying it back. Shion is like, "You've done plenty, also let go of my collar." And Nezumi says, "Make me." Do you know Shion's iconic response to this? "I'll bite your nose off." This is what I have dubbed Gremlin Shion, whenever sweet, naive, kind Shion acts like an insane freak, which is surprisingly often. Anyways, this of course is changed in the anime, because why wouldn't it be? Nezumi says, "I'm returning the favour instead of repaying a debt." A small but important difference. It has the implication that Nezumi's just being a bit nice. He's, returning the favour. Compared to the novels, where this is a responsibility he must complete, a debt to be paid off, not out of the kindness of his heart, but just in order to be free from anything tying him down. Also, instead of Shion being annoyed and saying Nezumi has done enough and then threatening to bite Nezumi's nose off, he says, "Oh, you're right. You are taller." Let me have fun, Studio Bones. They took such a fun line and changed it in a way that means another really fun line, one in episode 5, also had to get cut. So expect me to bring this back up in a bit. I did realize upon reread that a little bit late in the scene, Shion does realize that Nezumi is several centimeters taller than him, but it's not here in this exact moment that he notices, and he also doesn't voice that realization. Nezumi explains his little robot mouse, the one that whispered in Shion's ear in episode 2. Remember at the end of episode 1 when I told you to remember the living people are warm bit? Yeah, it's a huge theme in the novels about warmth and life. Robots are cold, the dead are cold, but real, living things right in front of you are not. Shion takes note of the temperature of things he touches all the time. It's not just Shion either, even like his mother at times. Which is why I find it very upsetting that upon being introduced to the robot mice, he says, "Amazing, they seem so alive." Like, what about the whole warmth thing? The robot has no warmth. That goes directly against one of the main themes in the novels. Though, also, this theme is completely cut in the anime, which makes it especially weird to keep the people are warm bit from episode 1. Either stick with it or cut it completely. Ideally, stick with it. Moving on, remember that blister on Shion's neck? And how it was definitely foreshadowing a wasp? Yeah, well, the wasp begins to come out. And Shion begins screaming in pain, and Nezumi is like, "What do I do?" And Shion tells him to cut the blister out that is on his neck. And Nezumi does. There's a bit in the novels when Shion is pretty much dying because of the wasp, where it says that blood and stomach fluids welled up inside his mouth and begin to spill over. And I think it's unfair that they didn't have this happen. I understand that that's gross and they're trying to keep this at TV-14, but this is a book series with graphic gore and murder, and so why even try and keep it lighthearted? A lot of the heavier or gorier parts were cut, and I wish they weren't full-on violence, even if it meant the series had to be rated MA or something. The story doesn't function if you try and keep it lighthearted, because a good part of it is about how gritty and horrid the world can be sometimes. You can't give that message if you never portray anything horrid. We cut to a brief scene of Safu going on the plane to her exchange trip. We see her talking with her grandma, and her grandma gives her a single knitting needle and stuff. I'm fine with the fact that they added some subplots and stuff with Safu and her grandma. Or at least I would be, if the show was like 24 25 episodes, but because of the main character's stories and arcs were cut so much, because the show is so short, it feels frustrating to waste time on a character who's like 50% a plot device. Anyways, we go back to Shion, and he was asleep for a while to rest, but he wakes up and sees himself in a mirror, and oh, his hair has gone white and a scar has wrapped all around his body now. Funsies! He obviously can't see most of the scar when he's wearing clothes, so he strips to see the scar and is like, and is very concerned. In the novels, he's obviously upset, but it's more like he's on the verge of tears and kind of exhausted. Here, it seems like he's having an active mental breakdown, which, yeah, it's a big life change, but it seems a little dramatic. In the novels, Nezumi says this: "If you don't like it, you can get rid of it. Skin grafting is no big feat in this time of age, right? As for your hair, you can dye it another color. I don't see any problem. But just letting you know, we can do something about your hair, but we won't be able to graft your skin here. We don't have the technology or facilities for that." He's described as having no hint of sympathy in his voice, and when you read it the first time, the assumption is because he's just not a sympathetic person, which is true. But upon reread, it takes on a new meaning. He has no sympathy because he's been dealing with the exact same problem. He has a huge scar on his back that he can never remove. And based on some lines here and there, it seems that Nezumi is a bit insecure about looking perfect. Because he's regarded as so gorgeous, he gets upset when there's the slightest imperfection in his appearance. And a burn scar that is described as looking spidery would be a pretty big imperfection. But in the anime, he doesn't say that quote. He instead says, "Just think of it as a medal of honoring your survival." And I can't even make a comment on how this doesn't fit into Nezumi's character, because I don't even know what it's trying to communicate. It's just dumb, and a really pointless change. There was no reason to make this change. It's also a really cringy line. Nezumi seems like he's trying so hard to be cool and badass, which is way worse than his novel characterization where he just is cool and badass without needing to try. Skip ahead a bit, and Nezumi has extracted something out of Shion's blister when he cut it open, and Shion says it's a wasp in the pupal stage of development. The original has Nezumi making a lot of comments and questions, because he doesn't know jack about bugs. He never had a formal education, let alone an entomology class. This leads to a lot of Shion info dumping about bugs. The anime just has Nezumi completely understand all the bug stuff though, which is a weird choice, because as I mentioned, he never had a formal education, let alone an entomology class. It kind of also takes away from the fact that there's Shion's strengths. You have the brains and the emotional intelligence in Shion, and the street smarts and charisma in Nezumi. So, for example, when later in the episode Shion finds a wasp, and Nezumi tells him that's a regular paper wasp, when it was the other way around in the books, it makes Shion seem kind of useless and pathetic. Science is supposed to be his strong point, but it seems like Nezumi knows just as much, or even if he knows less, the gap in their knowledge is much smaller. They talk about plot stuff, and they go out in the evening to go to Inukashi's hotel. Inukashi is the information seller I mentioned at the beginning. They also live with a bunch of dogs that they loan out, and use to get information with, which is where their name comes from. This scene happens much later in the novels, a full month into the future, but who's surprised by that? What is more upsetting is that they cut the scene that takes place before Shion and Nezumi enter the hotel, when they're sitting in front of it. I could pick apart every single thing in this scene and the different ways it is important, but no one wants that, so instead I'll focus on a few lines I felt were nice touches. They're talking about September 7th, 2013, when Shion stitched up Nezumi's wound. "So did you take out the stitches yourself?" "Of course, it was easier than making soup." "But did it leave a scar?" "Yeah, but I won't show you." Shion stuck out his lip. "Don't be stingy." This has the same effect as skin grafting. It takes on a new meaning once you know about the burn scar. It also foreshadows Shion's feelings once Nezumi does reveal this burn scar in Volume 6. Nezumi mentions how he had no reason to reveal it, and how it would be more inconvenient than anything. The narrator comes in. The he in question is Shion. He wished Nezumi had revealed it. He wished Nezumi had revealed the scar earlier. He wanted Nezumi to speak about the past which surrounded it. Shion didn't have the right to accuse him of why he had hidden it up till now, on why he said nothing, but that was why he wanted Nezumi to open up and tell him. Shion wants Nezumi to tell him things, not because it's necessary, but just for the sake of communication, for the sake of being vulnerable. Don't be stingy. Was it that important for talking about the anime? No! But they left it out and I wanted a chance to talk about why I like this scene so much. Back to the stuff that does happen in the anime. They go to Inukashi's hotel, and it's revealed that one of Nezumi's mice brought a letter to Kara notifying her of Shion's whereabouts, and she sent the letter back with an address, so they had contacted Inu to find out where the address is. Also, novel Nezumi sends this letter himself, where anime Nezumi says that one of the mice decided to go off on their own. Huh? A pet mice? A pet mouse? First of all, it takes away all of Nezumi's agency, and the fact that he can be a complex character who can tell Shion to forget his mother while also writing a letter to Shion's mother for him. Secondly, mice can't write letters. So, like, what? Who did write the letter? If it wasn't Nezumi, is he just lying? We have no indication that he is. What a stupid decision. It also takes away one of the only times in the story that Nezumi shows a hint of embarrassment, and I honestly don't think he's showed being embarrassed once in the entire anime. Anyways, Nezumi tells Shion that if he learns the entire truth about No.6 and still plans on protecting the people from the parasitic wasps, then they'll become enemies. And that is the end of the episode. Yay! The room layout is different in the novel to the anime, and the set design in general. For example, the city of No.6 was heavily inspired by the Netherlands in the background, which makes it very green and city, compared to in the novels where it's extremely clinical and there are pretty much no plants outside the forest park, which helps build the feeling of this fake paradise. If you want to experience nature, you have to go to this very specific government-run park that is not natural. The main thing I want to talk about is Nezumi's underground house. It is very small and very cramped and described as having thousands of books strewn across the floor and everywhere, really. There also definitely isn't a piano, even though there is for some reason in the anime. Very confusing change, because why would there be a piano in a library vault? I could understand the idea of why would there be a gas stove. But that's portable and something Nezumi probably brought in himself. Why would he bring in a piano? As far as I know, he doesn't play piano. Also, why does he have a couch? In the anime, Shion sleeps on the couch while Nezumi obviously sleeps in his bed. In the novel, they don't have a couch, so they're forced to share a bed. Not even in a gay way, just in a we're poor and not going to waste money on a second sleeping place way. Giving them more furniture and stuff makes them feel less like they live in a poor area and are struggling to survive, and makes them seem more privileged. Also, Shion's decision to stay in the West Block, and the way he doesn't miss his privileged life, seems less impactful when his quality of life isn't that bad in the West Block, as I mentioned earlier. I am now filming at a much different angle than yesterday. Don't worry about it. Episode 4. Our main two are going into the marketplace in the West Block. I'd like to briefly describe how it goes down in the novels, so I can explain to you why I don't like what happens in the anime. So, Shion is struggling to keep up with Nezumi because there's a large crowd and he's fast. There's a group of thieves running through, and the guy who was stolen from has a huge rifle he's pointing at the thieves. Shion runs and tries to knock the rifle out of the way, because someone innocent will definitely get shot if the man uses the gun in such a crowded place. The guy with the gun gets super pissed at this, and beats the ever-living hell out of Shion, and then nearly blows his brains out. He also calls Shion a little fucker, which I thought was funny enough to mention. Luckily, some shopkeeper got mad at the man with the gun and told him to take this fight somewhere else because it's driving away business. Well, this makes the gunman even angrier, and so these two get into a fight, and it gives Shion the chance to run away. While he's running away, a woman pulls him into an alley, so he's able to catch his breath a bit. The woman is a prostitute, and she's trying really, really hard to flirt with Shion, and he is not getting it. At one point, she forcibly kisses him, and he obviously pushes her away, which she gets upset about. Then Nezumi comes along and says, "Would you mind? That one belongs to me," which might I say, no, he doesn't. No one belongs to anyone but themselves. There's this hysteric bit that I just need to read aloud because it's so funny. I see, no wonder I was getting such a slow reaction. This one here isn't interested in women. What? Actually, that's not true. Nezumi pressed a hand over Shion's mouth and smiled at the woman. That's right! He's so head over heels for me. Even the most beautiful girl couldn't attract his attention right now. The woman hunched her shoulders as if to say, oh well. She glanced at Shion. Money, she said. I don't care which way Sweetie swings, but I still need payment for that kiss. 1 silver coin. Entire interaction is hilarious and I love it, and I do sometimes mutter to myself, I don't care which way Sweetie swings, because it's such a funny line to me. Nezumi literally presses a hand over Shion's mouth so he can't talk. It's perfect. They later get into a conversation with the Disposers. They're a group of strong men who people pay money to clean up dead bodies whenever they appear, because no one wants to do it themselves, but nobody wants dead bodies out in the storefront. It drives away business. The second one of the Disposers comes to talk to them, Nezumi dips immediately. Getting into a fight with these guys isn't worth it. The guy who was talking to Shion grabs him by the hair, but then also calls the white hair pretty, saying he thought it was some kind of wig or something. He invites Shion to join them for food and drink, which Shion doesn't want to do, but he knows that if he just keeps telling the man to let go of his hair, it's not going to work. He gives in, and says it's okay, he'll join them, which gets the man to loosen his grip a bit. Shion takes this opportunity to kick the man in the balls, and then while the guy is doubled over in pain, immediately sprints away. And that's about the end of the chapter. It covers everything I want to discuss for this part of the episode. So, if I'm doing the math correctly here, there were 3 moments where Shion was in some kind of trouble in the novels, and in 2 of them, he was able to make some kind of smart decision to get himself out of trouble by finding the right opportunity to run away. The other moment, and the one that is the least important to the world building and character arcs, the one with the prostitute, he needs Nezumi to come and save him. If you knew 2 of these moments were cut, and 1 was kept, which one do you think it would be? Let's find out. In the anime, Shion's whole interaction with the gunman is completely cut, so it's not that one. Not that the gunman is cut, he still gets stolen from and still tries to shoot the thief, but Shion does nothing to stop him. He just completely ignores him like how everyone else does. It doesn't make sense for him when he's someone who isn't very good at doing nothing when others are in danger, and that makes it more impactful throughout the story when we're able to see him not help those in danger in later parts, to focus solely on himself and those close to him, and not be surprised that he wouldn't help those people, because the progression was slow and natural. But any active choice he made in the anime to try and keep others safe is now gone. He's less of an active participant in the story that he is the main character of. Then Shion gets pulled aside by the prostitute. They cut out all of the prostitute and Nezumi's lines about how, like, yeah, Shion's super gay. Which completely takes away all the levity from the scene and makes it super uncomfortable. Then, as payment, Nezumi kisses the woman and gives her an orange. I don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable, but whatever. Also, when they're walking away, Shion asks who that woman was, and Nezumi has to tell him that she was a prostitute? Excuse me, Shion may be a bit oblivious, but he's not stupid. He definitely should have been able to figure out that one on his own. Next, the Disposers. For some reason, 2 of them come instead of just 1, and instead of coming over to invite them for food, they come over angrily. They come over and say, "We found you. Did you seriously think that kiss would pay your debt to that woman?" Huh? Yes, I did, actually. She seemed to think so too. This makes no sense. It's not even like they say later that Nezumi owed her a debt for something else that happened in the past. Like, it's purely for the kiss. I don't get it. Why? What? Huh? This makes no sense. Because also, why would the woman bother getting 2 men to go after them to get money from them? It's not like they owed her a ton and they also paid it off with a kiss. This just gets everyone to more drama than if she just left it be. Instead of Nezumi running away, which allows us to see Shion dealing with the Disposers on his own, Nezumi just punches them, which I feel like can only get into more trouble later. Like, the guys were big and strong and angry. Punching them gets you into more trouble than running away, which is what Nezumi did in the novels, and it's actually kind of a signature move of his. Anyways, Shion does pretty much nothing, and just follows Nezumi when they run away. Oh, so it was the 2 character moments where Shion helps himself that were cut, and they kept the one when Nezumi comes in to be cool and save him. That's so awesome! This also means they can't include a moment later on when Nezumi compliments Shion on how much he's improved at running away, because Shion hasn't done anything. This is a recurring theme, where moments where Shion is shown any kind of improvement are cut, which also means any moment where Nezumi congratulates him on said improvement are cut. I was getting hot, so I took off my sweater. If I get cold again later on, I'll put it back on. They're going to meet a new character, Rikiga, the guy who Inukashi figured out is connected to the note from Karen. Here we learn that Nezumi is an actor by trade, and has the stage name Eve. At the beginning of the scene, Rikiga's a huge fan, but by the end he realizes what a jerk Nezumi is, so he kind of hates him. The thing is, in the novel, Nezumi is an asshole to Rikiga, like, every chance he gets. Here he insults Rikiga, like, twice. It's not that big a deal. Rikiga learns that Shion is Karan's son, and we figure out that he's quite in love with Karan, so throughout the story he cares about Shion and no one else. We learn that Rikiga runs a business pimping out women to high officials of NO.6, but they neglect to mention any of his other businesses, of which he has many, the main one being a porno magazine. It's not that important, but I feel like it adds to the character building and world building. Also, Rikiga's a huge alcoholic, a fact kept in the anime but way less extreme. Rikiga says that Nezumi's so beautiful, he should join in on his business with NO.6 officials. Nezumi says, absolutely not. Actually, his exact quote is, "Are you telling me to take on customers? The alcohol gone to your brain, old man?" Rikiga's response, "Don't try to play cool with me. God knows where you've come from and where you've been. A wandering actor like you has probably had experience with it anyways. It's no use pretending you're an innocent." Fortunately, he's forced to stop talking because Shion yells at him to shut up and throws a cup of coffee at his face. I hate Rikiga. I felt very gross writing those words into my script, and I feel it's just as gross reading them out loud. Shion physically attacks Rikiga, which feels a bit like an overreaction, and yells at him to apologize to Nezumi. Nezumi literally grabs him under the arms to make him stop. It's really funny. A few lines they cut that I really liked from this interaction was, "That's a surprise. I never imagined you'd resort to violence. I guess even you let the blood get to your head sometimes, huh? Enough to go attacking people to that." And Shion responds, "First time in my life." I can tell, your heart's going a mile a minute. Anyways, Nezumi mentions how it's not exactly worth it to get angry over being insulted, and Shion calls him an idiot over this. Shion gets so upset that he begins crying, which Nezumi barely reacts to in the anime, but I find it funny how exasperated he is in the novels. They also cut out Nezumi telling Shion to wipe his face on Rikiga's silk tablecloth, unfortunately. Nezumi has a moment where he says not to get into fights or cry for other people, to save those actions for yourself, but the anime cuts out what happens next, where Shion says he doesn't understand what Nezumi's saying. He doesn't get the idea of not caring about other people, of only prioritizing himself. It eventually leads to Nezumi getting a pretty important line. "I've always found it impossible to understand you. Even if we spent our whole lives together, I probably still wouldn't understand you. You're right in front of me, but at the same time, it's like you're far away." Those lines come up multiple times later in the story, so it really sucks that they were removed. As they're leaving, Nezumi picks up a specific photo off the floor, and he's staring really hard at one of the guys in the photo, and he's asked if he knows him, and he responds, "I might. He's my godfather." For some reason they cut this line out. Like, they still have Nezumi stare at the guy, but don't have the line about him being Nezumi's godfather. That was pretty important. Sometime later, Shion gets a job at Inukashi's place washing their dogs, and we get some conversation from them. Inu mentions how if a dog is dying and in pain, they sometimes pay Nezumi to sing. That helps the dogs die quickly and painlessly. They had Nezumi do that for their mum, not their biological mum, but there was a female dog who raised them, that mum. Then we get a scene we never get in the novels. Nezumi comes over and says, "She was a filthy mixed breed, wasn't she though?" In reference to Inu's mum. What the hell? Nezumi never says this in the novels. Why'd they make him a dog racist, huh? Why'd they make him a dog racist? Whatever. Nezumi gets irritated at Shion, and Inukashi asks if they always behave like that around each other, because Nezumi isn't the type to let his emotions show so easily. I haven't really been wanting to talk too much about the way the messing up of the timeline affects the story, but here it's really bad and I just gotta. So towards the end of Volume 2, and through Volume 3 in the novel, Safu returns to number 6 from her exchange trip because her grandmother, her last living relative, passed away. While back, she gets captured by the security bureau, the police, and taken to the correctional facility. Karan sees this happen and writes a note to Nezumi telling him to help Safu. Nezumi threatened/paid Inukashi to get information on the correctional facility for him. Inu suspects that Nezumi's job has something to do with Shion. Later, Shion finds out on his own that Safu has been taken, and Inu finds out that Shion knows. Inukashi goes to have a conversation with Nezumi and says that Shion is going to go to the correctional facility to save Safu, and he's going to end up getting himself killed in the process. Nezumi gets very upset at them, because Inukashi made fun of him during this conversation by suggesting that he cares about Shion enough to protect him? The horror. They end up getting into a physical fight that ends with Nezumi getting bit in the shoulder by one of Inukashi's dogs, upon which Inukashi dips and comes with a lantern looking for Nezumi. More important stuff happens later, but I'll save that for the discussion on episode 7. Just know that Shion mends Nezumi's dog bite. In the anime at this point, Safu has not yet been taken to the correctional facility, so Nezumi has not yet hired Inukashi, and Inukashi isn't coming to tell him that Shion's gonna go on his own to rescue Safu because Safu doesn't need rescuing yet. So instead, the reason Inukashi comes to talk to Nezumi is because he insulted their mother. I see. That's why they included that line. Then they bring up Shion and say that the reason Nezumi insulted their mum was because he was jealous of their and Shion's relationship and the conversation they were having. Sorry, what? 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 I'm remembering the tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow scene from Volume 8. I'll put it up on screen for those who haven't read the novel if you want to read it. Anyway, it takes place way after this scene, and it's a great example of the way that Nezumi could not care less who Shion talks to. Nezumi doesn't get jealous. Anyways, for some reason that's how they get into a fight. However, there's another thing they change. Nezumi never gets bitten in the anime. So literally what was the point? We never get the scene where Shion mends Nezumi's wound, which was really important. Anyways, I'll talk about this again in the section on episode 7. I don't really have much important to say for the rest of the episode. I have a bit of a conspiracy theory. That theory is that many of the changes the writers made to Nezumi's character, such as the jealousy, making him nicer, etc., was in order to make teenage girls lust after him. I know, an odd claim. However, this series is a shoujo, meaning it's aimed at young women, and if there's one thing women like in media, it's an attractive bad boy who's not actually that bad, and who can be their knight in shining armour. They already had the attractive thing, but the issue this presents is Nezumi is a bad boy who is actually that bad. This could also explain the choice to make him shirtless when he comes out of the shower in episode 3, despite this not making any sense for his character, because the young women at home love a shirtless anime boy. I don't think they just changed Nezumi. I think it's also why they changed Shion. I think part of the reason they made Shion so much less capable and took away his entire arc around becoming a stronger and meaner person is so that we can have Nezumi be the savior, and Shion can be an audience villain. Unfortunately, in order to make this work, they also have to make Nezumi a better, more helpful person, because if they made Shion weaker but kept Nezumi the same, Shion would just die, because Nezumi wouldn't go out of his way to help him. This assumption does rely on unfortunate gender roles. In the novel already, Nezumi and Shion have a very unequal relationship. Nezumi is put on this pedestal and Shion feels incapable and useless, something felt only stronger by Nezumi's verbal reinforcement of those facts. Shion wishes to be more equal with Nezumi, a fact not changed in the anime but minimized. Shion works very hard throughout the story to be equal with Nezumi. It takes active effort and he changes a lot because he doesn't want to be this damsel in distress relying on the help of others. However, with the anime putting Shion in a more feminized role, they need to make him a damsel in distress and keep him in that role. He cannot progress past it or want to progress past it. Otherwise, how will the girl at home be able to be saved by their knight in shining armor? It ignores the possibility that girls may not want to be saved, or may want to be the knights themselves, of course. It's that thing that often happens in shipping culture where gender roles are just reinvented, the strong man and the frail woman, except they're both men. This doesn't tend to happen in sapphic ships as much, because people don't care about sapphic women, so they don't get enough attention for people to do it to them. It also feels kind of insulting, if my theory is correct, on these changes happening because the target audience is teen girls. It implies that girls can't understand, or at the very least don't care about complex character writing past shipping or fantasies, which is obviously not true for many reasons. The one that I can present to you the most easily is that I am a teen girl who hates everything about what the anime did in order to be more appealing to teen girls, and I'm making this video right now. Episode 5. There are more people dying of the parasitic wasp illness even though it's winter. Cool. Safu is on her exchange trip. Cool. We've just wasted the first 5 minutes of the episode, though admittedly a minute 30 of that was for the intro. Still, that's a lot of time. Shion is reading The Happy Prince. Whoa, we know that book. It came up earlier. To the 2 kids named Diko and Karan. She shares a name with Shion's mother. You're probably asking, who? Because the anime forgot to introduce them, even though the scene they appeared in was pretty important. All the way back in the beginning, the first chapter of Volume 2, someone knocks on the door of the library room. Shion immediately goes to get the door, but Nezumi's like, no, Joe, it could be anyone, that's not a safe decision, you could get killed. And Shion's like, yeah, but what if it's really important? I think you're overreacting. So Shion opens the door anyway. It's a good thing he did, because there's a little girl there, and she needs help. Her brother is dying. Shion runs out into the night with her and tells Nezumi to bring emergency kit and blankets, which Nezumi does despite just telling Shion not to answer the door. The boy was choking on a nut, and Shion does an excellent job at rescuing him. We learn that the boy is named Diko and the girl is named Kalan. Kalan says that Diko is always hungry no matter how much food they eat, and that is probably the reason he tried to eat the nut. Interesting how the anime cuts this scene out, where Shion is shown being capable, and also proving Nezumi wrong. Food for thought. Anyway, he reads to them occasionally, in both the anime and novel. In the novel, when Shion is reading to the kids, Riko says he's hungry, and Shion says that they might have leftover soup. Kalan turns him down and takes her brother home. Nezumi makes a comment after they leave about how Kalan is smarter than Shion. Kalan has a better idea of how things work. That girl is bright and dignified. She knew to refuse your half-hearted and reckless charity. He says that Shion shouldn't offer food to kids unless he knows he can feed them every time. Because what happens the next time they're starving and ask for food? Knowing what a full stomach feels like only makes an empty one that much more unbearable. In the anime, Shion offers soup unprompted. It paints this perfect little cinnamon roll image of him that I don't like too much. Shion grew up privileged and probably wouldn't have even considered the fact that the kids might be hungry until Riko expressed it. Also, Karan's reason for rejecting his offer is different this time. She doesn't give a reason in the novel, though Nezumi gave one for her, probably an accurate one, rejecting the half-hearted charity. In the anime, she says, Mum says we'll be able to eat dinner tonight. And that's her reason for rejecting his offer. It makes the world seem brighter. It's okay, I don't need your charity because I was lucky today. Instead of, no, I would benefit from receiving your charity, but the world has hardened me and I cannot accept it even though I need it. When they leave and Nezumi calls Shion stupid, he doesn't go into why it's bad to do random acts of kindness, just says that it won't get you anywhere in a place like this. Shion responds, then you're an idiot too. You've been showing them kindness as well. Because apparently, he let Kalan have the sweater that Shion let him borrow 4 years ago. Definitely not within character for Nezumi. Also, remember when I complimented the show and that the sweater offered a nice metaphor about romantic love? I guess not. In a scene later with Shion, Rikiga, and Inukashi, Rikiga mentions how Inukashi uses their dogs to steal food from the correctional facility and sells it on the black market. This is different from the novels, where Inukashi buys food and scraps off of Getsuyaku, the lowest level cleaning personnel and also Lili's stepfather. Cutting Getsuyaku doesn't seem like a big deal, but it makes the correctional facility much less intimidating. Inukashi was only able to get stuff from the facility because they were talking to an actual person, and one who's not particularly invested on the goings-on inside the facility. But by using dogs to steal, it either means A, there's just a garbage pile where everything goes to that Inukashi's dogs could easily access, which is not at all the correctional facility's style, or B, Inukashi is in some way able to get physically inside the facility, which is even less likely. It makes the correctional facility seem less like a fortress and more just like some building. The three of them are having a conversation, and Shion finds out that the parasitic wasps are active even though it's still winter, and he's like, I need to tell Nezumi as soon as possible. As Inukashi aptly points out, Nezumi likes the parasitic wasps. It's killing the residents of No.6, which is exactly what he not wants, but Shion just ignores that detail. We cut to Sasu at a museum on her exchange trip, and her teacher tells the class to line up in a single file. Then we come back to the West Block, and this guy is out in front of a theatre, is telling all the theatre goers to line up in single file. It's good writing. The theatre? Wait a minute. That's where Nezumi works. Shion decides the fastest way to contact Nezumi was to go see one of his performances and then, I guess, just meet up with him after the show? I don't understand this plan at all, because it's not like Shion could get backstage to talk with him before or right after the show, and he does have to pay money to see the show, so why not just show up to the theatre right as the show ends, and then wait for Nezumi at the exit, if it's really that important. I don't see how seeing the show will make him be able to talk to Nezumi faster, unless his plan was to interrupt the show or something just to tell Nezumi this information. But it does mean that both we, the audience, and Shion can see Nezumi perform. This never happened in the novels, but did happen in an extra entitled Flowers for Beautiful Days that came with the special edition of the 6th volume of the manga adaptation. The anime came out before that though this is our first real view of the theatre, other than Nezumi's descriptions of it. So we see him on stage and... he's playing a woman. Not actually that surprising considering they're doing Shakespeare and women weren't allowed to act in Shakespeare's time period. So yeah, men played women all the time. It didn't sit right with me for a while that they decided to make him cross-dress one on stage, and I was confused with myself for a while. There's nothing wrong with cross-dressing, it makes sense for the show they're doing, it's simply being different from the novel isn't enough to hate it. I would be a really lame person if that was my entire reason. So if that's not it, then what is my reason? And I think I figured it out. 1. In the intermission, I talked about my theory about changing Nezumi in order to make him more appealing to teenage girls, and I think there's another example of that. Women in fandom, myself included, find it fun to put boys in dresses, so by the show doing it, it makes him more appealing to fandom culture. 2. In Chapter 3, Volume 2, Nezumi says this. We're talking about a playhouse here in the West Block. People who've got a little spare cash to spend come out to forget their worries for a while. We haven't got any embroidered drop curtains, decent costumes, or stage props. It's mostly an impromptu song and dance. That's it. Sure, they may have NO.6 in the back, so you can see the crumbling walls, but it's still much better in the anime than Nezumi described. They're also performing Hamlet, which is a lot more than an impromptu song or dance. I think the reason his playing a woman irritates me isn't because he's acting like a woman. He does that all the time in the novels. It's because he has a costume. Not just a costume, but a decent one. An excellent one. He has a flower in his hair, his dress is beautiful, he has makeup. Though admittedly, it doesn't seem to be stage makeup because he gets really washed out in the light, and the point of stage makeup is to make sure you don't get washed out in the stage lights. The point that I'm trying to make is that even if it's a little dingy, this is a very normal theatre compared to the novel where Nezumi says his job is a couple steps up in class from the porno that Rikika runs. It also made clear in the novels that Nezumi is the only actor, and it shows how good he must be at acting to be able to get people to spend what little money they have to see just him perform in this rundown little building. We keep cutting back and forth between Shion at the show and Safu at a museum, and at the moment she's looking at a big stained glass art piece that has 3 bees on it, which isn't plot related at all. I swear this totally won't come back later. We're back to Nezumi, and he's performing, but suddenly a song fills his ears. It's not a song that's actually being sung, only he can hear it, and it causes him to faint. He wakes in a field, not literally, this is happening in his head. A voice beckons him. She says that she will teach him a song. In the novel, this definitely seems to be a childhood memory. The description says that the grass is very tall around him because he is still a small child. The anime starts out like this, but the sky becomes red and Nezumi gets trapped in this melting black goop. I suppose it's a nightmare, or maybe it starts out as a memory and then warps into a nightmare, but I doesn't think it explained at all, so I can't know. Now, there's something I neglected to mention. And by neglected to mention, I mean purposely kept a secret for dramatic effect. Safu, while staring at the glass-stained bees, can also hear the song, and also passes out. And I ask but one simple question. Huh? We know that Nezumi hears the song from a childhood memory, and we learn later that he was taught the song as part of the culture he grew up in. Also, correct me if I'm wrong, but the feeling that I had is that Nezumi hears the song because he passes out, not that he passes out when he hears the song. So I beg the question, in the anime instead, is it like the song is just something that's happening, like, everywhere, innately in the world, and only a select few people can hear it, and those who hear it, it leads them to fainting? Because otherwise, why would Safu faint and hear the song at the same time Nezumi did? I am now realizing that Nezumi faints in the evening. It's an evening performance. And Safu faints and goes to the museum in the day. So maybe it's not happening at the same time. It's not like a worldwide song thing. We're just being shown them having the same symptoms at the same time in the show, even though within the canon of the show it's happening at different times. The overall conclusion is that the anime changed a crap ton of the lore, and it makes the story A, make less sense, and B, as we'll talk about in episode 11, have a way worse conclusion. Back to Nezumi. Nezumi is able to wake up, and he's laying on his back on the bed in the library vault. Shion is standing over the bed, trying to get him to wake up. How did he get from the theater to his house? Who knows? Presumably Shion took him home, but I don't know what happened right after Nezumi passed out for those who are conscious. Did Shion climb on stage to check on him there? Did staff take him off stage while he passed out? How long was he out for? This is a great example of how something as simple as the location an event happens on can really confuse the story. Novel Nezumi is already in the library vault with Shion when he passes out, and we immediately see Shion jump into action. He checks Nezumi's pulse and breathing, makes sure it's not the fault of a parasitic wasp. Don't worry, it wasn't. And he's generally a very good EMT. But now there's some confusion. Shion cannot immediately get to Nezumi when he passes out. The show never shows us A, Shion's immediate medical treatment, or B, how they get from the theater to their home. In the novels, we know Nezumi was only out for a few minutes, but it was presumably a very long period of time in the anime, seeing as how they changed locations, but we never get answers on how they changed locations. We do at the very least still see Shion quiz Nezumi on what 7 plus 3 and 7 times 3 are in order to check for brain damage. Shion is worrying over him, and Nezumi yells at him to shut up and also physically pushes Shion away a bit. In the novels, Shion completely ignores Nezumi's outburst, and instead presses down on his arms at intervals in order to check for edema. He's also doing the same thing he did with Yamase, intently studying someone having a medical problem so he can figure out exactly what it is that's going on. He also says in the novel, "Well, you fainted so suddenly I had to take every precaution." He is studying, trying to acquire knowledge. Anime Shion does react to Shion yelling at him, and he seems vaguely sad, and doesn't try to study Nezumi at all. Though, admittedly, he was just pushed and Nezumi didn't physically push him in the novels. We go back to Safu. She's in a hospital bed, and explaining to her friend what happens. She says she heard a song, and then mutters, "Nezumi." She asks in her head, "Who is Nezumi, Shion?" I don't get it. Why would she think she's connected to Nezumi? Why would she even know that there is a person named Nezumi? I'm confused. Why would you do this to me, Studio Bones? Safu gets told that she has to go back to NO.6 because, quote-unquote, "Be strong. Your grandmother, ... Her grandma's dead. Y'all aren't stupid. Her grandma died." And we cut back to Nezumi and Shion. And Nezumi's out of costume and they're talking about the wasp, so time is presumably passed. They're talking about the wasp and how they're active in the winter. And Nezumi's unsurprisingly like, "Hell yeah, let's celebrate." And he decides to teach Shion a dance. I don't know why. Not that I don't know why they dance, it's something that still happens in the novels. I don't know why this is the reason for it. Not when Nezumi yells to shut up. We get some narration about why he yells that. There are 2 more lines of dialogue, and then we go straight into the dancing scene. The narration explains that the reason Nezumi yells is because Shion is showing so much worry for him. And I quote, "He did not want someone to be so earnestly concerned about his well-being like this. He did not want anyone to be so seriously worried. He did not want to be cared about." Feelings like concern, worry, and care fell all too easily into the frame of love. He didn't feel like he needed anything like that. He could live without it. He always had. It was unnecessary. The anime does not do a good job of showing Nezumi's not just apprehension, but downright avoidance of love. He runs from it like the plague. And honestly, by episode 7 in the anime, Nezumi just seems completely fine with love, and he didn't hate it that much beforehand. This narration gives context to what happens right after the dancing scene, so I'm gonna read what the characters say. Shion, "That was a workout. Takes your whole body to dance, doesn't it?" "You didn't know?" "I didn't. Guess I'm that much smarter now." "So, I'm all out of breath, but you're not tired at all. Is that the point you wanted to make?" "You could say that." "You have far more energy, athletic skill, and resilience than me. You're not the one I should be worrying about." "That's what you're saying, right?" "I won't be that blatant, but..." And I'm gonna stop there. You see how those lines connect to Nezumi's desire to not be cared for, and you see how the dancing connects to that? But even though Nezumi decides they should dance for a completely different reason, they still have this conversation. Also, the anime cut the line, "Guess I'm that much smarter now," which makes me sad because it's another tick on the list of witty lines Shion had that got cut for some reason. They have to have this conversation in order to start what happens next in the story, but there's just no reason to say that the dance is a celebration. Nezumi doesn't give any reason in the novels for why dancing. He just randomly decides to teach Shion a dance, even though it's not random when put into context. Also, I want to complain about the fact that the dancing scene lasts almost 2 full minutes in the anime. I truly don't care. I feel like it's supposed to be so romantic. Ooh, they're dancing and Nezumi is so pretty. But I really couldn't care less. It's not like I don't like romantic moments between the characters. It's just all that the good ones are either cut or bastardized in some way that takes away all the emotional impact. So the anime is like, shoot, what do we do? The dancing scene in the novels, as far as I could tell, was completely platonic. It's honestly the straightest thing in the scene. Also, in the novels, because dancing is something that requires standing very close to whoever you're dancing with, Nezumi takes this moment to point out that he is, in fact, taller than Shion. And Shion responds with, "There's barely any difference." But of course, because they changed "I'll bite your nose off" into Shion acknowledging Nezumi's height, this is lost again. I find this line especially fun with the fact that Shion has already acknowledged the fact that Nezumi is taller in his head. This is a great example of why a character shouldn't say all their thoughts aloud. Back on topic. After Shion and Nezumi's short conversation, Shion briefly touches Nezumi's neck and explains how he thought a wasp was going to come out of it, how terrified he was at the thought of Nezumi dying. There's an absolutely fantastic scene in the novel. Nezumi completely freezes up in fear. The neck was one of the most fatal parts for a human, the narrator says. If Shion had been an enemy, if he had the intent to kill, if he had been holding a knife, Nezumi most certainly would have been killed. Nezumi essentially has a panic attack in this scene, and I love it. The utter terror that kicks in from a life of trauma, of living in survival mode, with the knowledge that you could be in danger at any given moment, so that receiving the slightest bit of affection for a very short period of time makes him genuinely think he's going to die. And the anime doesn't not do this. The tone is weird and I'm not exactly sure how to describe it, but it doesn't evoke the same emotional reaction the novel does. I remember I read my brother's the excerpt when Nezumi has his neck touched, and my brother said that he felt that fear. The description of the narration made him feel that terror right alongside Nezumi. I kind of feel like that fear is missing from the anime. Maybe it's because of the way that I'm watching this, the way I pick it apart. But from what I've seen of other people's thoughts on this scene in the anime, they didn't seem to take away the important pieces of information that you do in the novel. The important bits are that 1, Nezumi is now somewhat scared of Shion, and 2, Nezumi has realized that he doesn't really actually know anything about Shion as a person, and what Shion is actually like. So the anime just kind of completely ignores that first point, even though it's kind of important. Alas, that is the end of episode 5, so moving right along. The anime is a lot less gay than the novels or even the manga, even though it kind of feels like it's trying to be more gay. We lose Shion waxing poetic about Nezumi's eyes, we lose all of Shion's gay yearning, we lose the I'll give you a kiss scene, but that's not the entire reason why. I think that some of the reason it seems less gay is because it's less toxic, and I think the reason for that is because of the limits put around Shion and Nezumi's relationship in the anime. I have not seen the interview directly, but I've heard that in an interview, Asano-sensei states that the reason she likes to write about deep same-sex relationships of all varieties is because they are allowed to be of all varieties, antagonistic or friendly or romantic, anywhere in between and beyond. The character's dynamic is allowed to be exactly what it is. When a male and female character have a deep relationship, it is automatically assumed to be romantic, and much nuance that the character's dynamic might have is lost. So by writing about same-sex relationships, they're allowed to be more complex. Shion and Nezumi have a very complex relationship in the novels. There's so much going on for both parties involved. The relationship is tense and supportive and destructive and relaxed and unequal, and my god, there's a lot more adjectives I could use and you still wouldn't get the full picture. Every time I reread the novels, I realise a new thing I missed last time about their relationship and the little details. In the anime, almost in tandem with Shion taking a traditionally feminine narrative role, the relationship loses its nuance and complexity and gets boiled down just to a romance, just like what Asano was talking about in straight couples in media. Of course, many moments of toxicity from the novels have to be included for plot reasons. For example, spoilers for next episode, Nezumi threatens Shion with a knife. But it doesn't read like one of the many ways their complex relationship presents. It reads as a brief deviation from their romantic relationship out of necessity for the plot. I'm of the belief that for something being gay, or more specifically queer, relies on its deviation from the cis-hetero norm. Like how everyone knows how Jessie and James from Pokemon are clearly in a queer relationship, despite the fact that they're a man and woman. Nezumi and Shion's queerness relies not only, and not even primarily, on the fact that both the characters are boys, but on the complexities it exhibits that deviate from the typical cis-hetero norm. But the anime's removal of those complexities removes the queerness, and leaves us with the most superficial one, the matter of a same-sex relationship. Episode 6. Safu returns to number 6 because, dead grandma, last of her living relatives, that kind of thing. She's given her grandma stuff, and the knitting needles aren't there. She asks about them, and the guy who's giving the stuff is like, nope, this is all the stuff she had. And then Safu has an epiphany about how the city is faking stuff, but I don't really see why. The idea is that she has an epiphany, tries to contact Shion to talk about it, and that's how she finds out he's not in the city. But she could have just gone to his house and seen that he wasn't there to find out he wasn't in the city. It's also kind of strange that she has this epiphany, because if anyone can just realize how fake the city is this easily, that doesn't seem like they were doing a particularly good job of hiding it, especially because the way Safu finds out is so dumb. I do have, in my notes, windmills! With 3 exclamation points instead of question marks this time. You know your show must be bad if the thing I'm most emotionally invested in is a transition shot. Safu goes to Karan's place to ask her about where Shion is, to which she finds out that he's in the West Block, and she decides to go there herself. I could pick apart everything they changed and how they made both Karan and Safu worse characters, but I'm trying to only focus on the main two in this analysis, so I don't end up making a 4-hour, 14-minute, and 23-second YouTube video. So I'm going to skip past it and tell you the important bit, which is that Safu gets captured by the Security Bureau and Karan sees this happen. We cut to Shion and Karan, the sister of Riko, not his mom, and Shion mentions a person who wore the sweater before Karan, and she's like, it was totally a girl, wasn't it? Which is weird, because how can she tell? And why does she care? Also, Safu never wore the sweater. She had her own different sweater. It was matching with inverse colours. Hers was a dark purple with light purple accents, and Shion's turn to Nezumi's turn to Kalan's is light purple with dark purple accents. So this conversation fundamentally doesn't make sense. I don't know if it just hasn't been brought up in the anime yet, or if I just didn't notice it, but Shion has this idea that he can presumably make a serum out of his own blood that can save people from the parasitic wasps, because he survived the wasp. He mentions here how he requested Vikiga to get some supplies for him in order to actually do it, and Nezumi gets pissed at him. He lightly cuts a little bit of Shion's neck, just a few layers of skin, enough for it to bleed a tiny bit, and says he didn't save Shion's life just so he could go wasting his blood. and he should save this stuff for something more useful. A little stupid, seeing as you're literally wasting his blood right now by making him bleed. But whatever, that's not an anime problem, it's just a Nezumi problem, seeing as this scene is pretty accurate to the original, it just takes place at a later date. Nezumi mentions how he's going to destroy number 6, and Shion asks why he hates it so much, which Nezumi refuses to answer. Then Shion asks a question he never asks in the books. Does it have something to do with the scar on your back? Excuse me? I mean, Shion has his inquisitiveness at least, but that is an invasive question. The thing that irritates me more is that Nezumi basically just doesn't react. He doesn't care that Shion knows about the scar at all, doesn't even acknowledge what he said. What happened to Mr. I don't want anyone to know anything about me? What he's learning here is that Shion has a leverage over a secret of his, a vulnerability, a scar from his past, and that's unsafe for Nezumi. Vulnerability means death, and Shion has gotten a hold of some of his. So this is incredibly out of character for Nezumi to just, not care. Nezumi just leaves the room after a bit more interrogation, but Shion follows after him. This episode combines 5 different important Nezushi conversations into one scene, which I feel like should be obvious why that's bad. All these scenes happen at different points in the characters' arcs after they've had different amounts of development, so it's kind of important that they happen in the right order, but the anime's pacing is strict anyway. Shion suggests instead of killing number 6, just take down the walls that surround it, so that the outside and inside aren't distinguishable anymore. Shion and Nezumi in the novels get into a proper argument. They're pissed at each other, and Shion even calls Nezumi a coward. But they cut out that bit at the end. Studio Bones hates me, and clearly that's why they removed all the best part and why Skate Season 2 hasn't come out yet. There just couldn't be any other explanation. Nezumi goes back inside the room and receives a letter from one of his mice. It's from Karan, explaining that Safu got snatched. He mulls over whether or not to show Shion the note. Novel Nezumi notes if he did, Shion would probably go straight to the correctional facility, because that's where Safu was probably taken to. She was taken by the security bureau after all. Anime Nezumi notes that he would go straight back to number 6, which is a change I don't understand because A, Safu was already taken, she's not in the city anymore, and B, Shion isn't allowed back in the city. He can't go back, he doesn't have an idea anymore, so I don't know how he would do that. Episode 7. I have a lot to say about this one. After the intro, we go to a scene with Nezumi and Inukashi inside one of the rooms of Inukashi's hotel. He wants Inukashi to collect information for him. Expensive information. Information worth multiple gold coins. Inukashi turns it down. Any job that rat offers worth that much is clearly dangerous and not worth it. Nezumi says that they won't work together anymore then. He won't ask for any more jobs from Inukashi, and likewise, if Inukashi wants help from him and asks for it, he will not give it. I mentioned Nezumi singing for those dying in pain. He says that if Inukashi were ever in that situation, no matter how much they called, he would not come to ease their pain, which is absolutely brutal. It's completely cut from the anime, but it's mentioned that novel Nezumi made Inukashi pay exorbitant amounts while singing for their mother, and Inukashi obviously still holds a grudge over that. I like that detail. It adds to what a jerk Nezumi is, and I wish it was included. Also, Nezumi specifically says in the novels, if you end up like your mother someday, and you're suffering because you can't die, it won't have anything to do with me. He connects it back to their mother, which doesn't happen in the anime, probably because they cut out how much money Nezumi made them pay up. I wish they had, because, again, it adds to Nezumi just being the worst, and it'd also be more upsetting for Inukashi. When Inukashi agrees to do the job, we learn what Nezumi wants information on. The correctional facility. Inukashi is very apprehensive to do this in the books, but anime Inu doesn't need too much convincing because they have such limited time frame and don't want to drag out scenes. Because of this, we lose a line when Nezumi says, "Please, Inukashi, I'm begging you." He's serious about this, enough to beg, and it's sad that we lose that side of Nezumi that needs to beg. We lose more complexity in the character due to time constraints, or maybe because the anime doesn't want to show perfect Nezumi not so perfect. Inukashi asks if the job has anything to do with Shion, and Nezumi's like, no, what? This has nothing to do with him, and you better not talk about this job with him. Inukashi in the novels asks later, is that white-haired weirdo of a little boy that precious to you? Nezumi vanished before their eyes. Before they could even utter a cry, Inukashi's body was pushed up against the wall, and a set of fingers were digging into their throat. "That's enough smart mouthing from you," Nezumi hissed. "Any more and I'll make sure you can never speak again." This spirals into one of Nezumi's mice fighting one of Inukashi's dog, temporarily paralyzing it. Shion runs up into the room because he was outside and heard Inukashi's dog yell. He gives the dog a bit of treatment and helps it feel better while Nezumi leaves. But in the anime, after Inukashi asks if Shion is important to Nezumi, Nezumi doesn't do anything. He just says, "Shut your impudent mouth and get to work, got it?" before leaving. This is a different character. We lose A, Nezumi losing his cool over Shion, the only person he ever loses his cool over. B, a chance to betray Nezumi as just the worst, which is important. Nezumi is not a good person, and that's why I love him. I don't like the anime Nezumi because he's just kind of sad and annoying, but isn't really portrayed with any of his interesting character traits, like his sarcasm or cruelty. He's not even really a theater kid. We go to a scene with Karan and Yuming. They have an entire plot of their own in the novel about trying to make people aware of the corrupt government that takes up a large part of the story, but it was pretty much entirely cut from the anime. Not that they don't get their own subplot, but it doesn't really go anywhere. It doesn't have any impact on the overarching plot. It's just time wasted in this already rushed series. So even though I love Karan, everything with her and Yuming should have been cut completely. When we go back to the West Block, Shun and Vikika are having a conversation about how Vikika's been having a really difficult time getting the supplies Shion requested. I genuinely don't know why this plot thread got taken so far in the anime. Shion suggests it as a passing thought at the end of Volume 1, brings it up again in Volume 2, which is when Nezumi tells him not to do it and lightly cuts his neck. And I don't think it's brought up ever again after that. Novel Shion drops the idea the second Nezumi tells him not to, but anime Shion just keeps going with the idea long after it's relevant. And then it just has to fade away because it never actually goes anywhere, but they kept it going past its natural conclusion, being Nezumi's knife threats. There's also a bit that happens before they run into each other that was really good. Shion has bought meat and bread for dinner with the money he's earned from his dog washing job. One of Inukashi's dogs that got a bit attached to him is coming along. A small child who looks so hungry begs him for some. He's not heartless, so he begins to open his bag and give some, before being hit from behind and the child snatching the food out of his hands. A group of children plan an operation to steal food. And Shion's impressed. He's obviously upset about his food being gone, but he's impressed with the kids for pulling a stunt with such skill, and he seems to think that they deserve the food if they're able to pull off a trick like that. The kids are probably hungrier than he is, and they'll probably go off someone shared amongst themselves. Isn't that a good thing? Luckily, the dog by his side goes after the kids, and gets at least some of the food back. That's when Shion and Vikika run into each other. This scene is a great example of Shion's time in the West Block being chaotic and difficult, and the way he learns from that, and also how he appreciates the chaos. He learns not to be as helpful, he learns to be on edge more, he learns to survive. He also thinks that the people who forced him to learn these things are cool as hell. Pacifism is a privilege, one that many are not afforded. You steal, scheme, and kill, or you don't survive. You're only able to worry about others when you don't need to worry about yourself, if you don't want to die, that is. This isn't just about No.6 here, this is about real life. Shion is privileged. He has had the comfort in his life up until now that he is able to extend a helping hand to others. He comes to the West Block and everyone says that helping hand of his is so stupid, naive, and dangerous. And they're correct. Pacifism is a privilege, and Shion learns that firsthand in the West Block. And so why cut this scene? I think the writers of the anime didn't understand No.6. They didn't get the point, and they were also on a time crunch. So why not cut this scene? It doesn't progress the plot in any way. But that's the thing. It progresses the character development. And I don't know about you, but good characters are much more important to me than a good plot. And the anime doesn't even have a good plot either. Vikika offers to buy Shion a coat. Actually, less offers and more forces Shion to let him buy him a coat. So they go to a clothing store and Shion finds a grey woman's coat with a torn sleeve. It's a coat Safu liked to wear. Huh. Why is Safu's clothing in a random store? In the West Block, no less. Shion firmly asks the lady who runs the store where she got the coat, compared to the novel where he's literally shaking. I don't actually like reading Shion super upset at the shopkeeper in the novels, but I do think it's important for his character, especially because he really cares about Safu, and he gets the most upset when it comes to people he cares about. He's actually quite mentally unstable, and it's important to see him flip on a dime. But you go to a bit with Safu at the correctional facility. It's from her perspective, and she's inside like a water tube or something? Definitely suspended in a liquid. There's some guys talking in hazmat suits about how they found the perfect sample, and how all the errors they've been having on their experiments will stop now that they have Safu. I'm not going to get into all the lore that changes, because the lore is kind of complex and I value your guys' and my own time, so I'll try and just focus on the character. But yeah, the anime kind of changes what the purpose of a sample is. Nezumi is walking somewhere, and Inukashi immediately comes and says, if you space out that much, it won't matter how many lives you have. This is from the scene where Inukashi and Nezumi get into a fight from episode 4, which happens in volume 3 in the novels. And now we're picking back up where we left off, but the rest of the episode has the rest of the volume 3 that wasn't there before. This line is strange. Nezumi's on screen for about 4 seconds before Inukashi says the line, and we have no clue what he's lost in thought about. He's not even sitting in the same place contemplating it. He's walking out of a tunnel, so it doesn't even seem like Inukashi was following him and he didn't notice. Inevitably, when you cut out so much, you lose the context for what you keep, so this line just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Also, the things that Nezumi were lost in thought about were important. Number 1, his goal to destroy number 6. And number 2, if he should tell Shion about the memo from Karan about Safu's abduction. But you don't know that if you watch the anime, only if you read the novel or manga. Anyways, Inukashi explains how Shion came to them with questions about the coat from the shop, how he's gonna go to the correctional facility without telling Nezumi a word, and he's gonna get himself killed. The dialogue is almost identical for a few pages, but then anime Nezumi just leaves part of the way through the conversation, where in the novels, right before they get into a physical fight. Towards the end of the fight in the novels, Nezumi gets bitten super hard in the shoulder by one of Inukashi's dogs. Once the fight is over, Inukashi mentions how Nezumi is human. He's really just a guy, a 16-year-old at that, and a man can only do so much by himself. Inukashi has decided to help Nezumi get information about the inside of the correctional facility. However, Shion is coming. One of the mice, one named Hamlet, had informed him that Nezumi was in danger, so Inukashi dips, leaving Shion and Nezumi alone to walk back to their underground home. But Inukashi and Nezumi don't fight at all in the anime. And you may remember from my section on episode 4 that Nezumi actually never gets bitten by a dog, so we never get to see Shion mend the wound. I want to talk about the chapter in the novel in which Nezumi and Inukashi fight, because it's a good one. The dog bite is in the exact same spot as the bullet wound from 4 years prior. Shion and Nezumi get to talking about it a bit because of it. Nezumi asks a question. He asks if Shion helping him was a mistake on Shion's part. Your life turned 180 degrees that night. Can you still say, even now, that what you did wasn't a mistake? Yeah. You don't regret it? No. Not even a bit? No. Why? Nezumi, I don't really understand what you're trying to ask, but I've done a little thinking about myself since moving to Lost Town. I wondered if I were to go back in time and return to that night 4 years ago, if I were to return to before I met you, what would I do? I thought about it over and over again, and every time there was only one answer. No matter how many times I'd return to that night, I'd do the same thing. I'd open the window and wait for you. Even if you knew that your own ruin was waiting beyond it. But there wasn't any ruin. I don't think my being here has ruined me at all. This is such a soft moment and gives such important characterization. Pretty much any soft moments where Shion and Nezumi just talk are shortened or cut completely, which is part of the reason why I think the romance feels so unnatural in the anime. I think my favourite moments are whenever the characters are just talking, or even just thinking. You get to learn about the way they view the world, and the types of things they are and aren't willing to share with other people. After this bit in the conversation, Nezumi gets onto the topic of how stupid it was for Shion to run out into the darkness to help Nezumi with nothing but a lamp in his hand. Shion is weak. He didn't bring anything to help with. He'd be nothing more than a burden if he tried to help, so he should just stay inside where he's not going to get hurt and he won't get in the way. Shion does not like this. Not the part about him being useless. He completely agrees with the fact that he's useless, because the boy's got terrible self-esteem. No, the thing that irritates him is Nezumi saying that he should have sat still and waited. Shion states that Hamlet had told him that Nezumi was in danger, and he was worried sick. Shion running out with the lamp wasn't in order to see how helpful he could be, but because he is not capable of sitting still when someone he cares about is in danger, no matter how useless he may actually be. Shion and Nezumi get into a proper argument over this, and Shion gets pissed. Nezumi has a thought after Shion yells at him. This is why humans are so troublesome. The more you involve yourself with them, the tighter your shackles become. They hinder free movement. It becomes harder to live only for yourself. Maybe you should never have met. Maybe one day, Shion, you'd come to think so too. I love these lines so much. The shackles and fetters that are human connection are a recurring theme in sections from Nezumi's perspective. As I mentioned, Shion's pissed and ends up punching a bookcase and knocking it over, which kind of snaps him out of his anger, and he apologizes for yelling. It seems like I'm always worked up when I'm with you, Shion sighed. I'm surprised at how emotional I can get sometimes. They talk a bit more about dinner, sleep. They calm down from the fighting and are in good moods now. Shion says one more thing before he goes to bed. If I hadn't met you, I probably would never have realized what kind of person I was, huh? I would have grown up into a mild, rational, obedient adult, without even knowing that there were so many emotions inside of me. I would never have known what it was like to cry, or get angry, or feel resistance to something. I met you, and I realized how much abundance I had, and I'm proud that I know now. I'm glad that I met you. And then he kisses Nezumi. Shion claimed that it was a good night kiss, and then fittingly goes to bed. I love how nonchalant he is. I should just read the final half page of this chapter, because it's so well written, and it can express the ideas it's trying to communicate better than I can. This section's in reference to Nezumi. He says, "Good night kiss, huh? Some lie you are." Like under his breath, because Shion's gone to bed already. His gnawing hunger, exhaustion, and sobbing pain ebbed away. In its place, something welled up from deep within. Sadness, loneliness, it wasn't quite either. What was it? A hot bead rolled down his cheek. It took him a while to understand that they were tears. He had long forgotten what it was like to cry. It tasted salty, like over-salted soup. Nezumi propped his knees up and put his head down on them. Slowly, he swallowed the tears that seeped into his mouth. I love this book so much! How about we move over to something I don't love, which is how the anime does this scene. Nezumi gets home, and Shion has made food, better than they usually have. He says, I bought it with the money I made washing dogs. They eat it, and during dinner asks, by the way, how's the serum coming along? What? You got so mad at him because he wanted to make a serum and tried to convince him not to do it by threatening him with a knife, and now you're just so nonchalant about it? Huh? They get talking about Safu, and Shion's promised to have sex with her in 2 years, which makes me uncomfortable. Nezumi says that Shion is pretty terrible at understanding women, and Shion's like, yeah, that's true, but I think I'm a good judge of character overall. And then he gives the I'm so glad I met you monologue here, and still kisses Nezumi right after. Wow, okay. So, firstly, Nezumi and Shion don't get into a fight because this doesn't take place right after the Nezumi Inukashi fight from episode 4. That was a pretty important scene. We got angry Shion, we got his worry over Nezumi's safety, more of Nezumi's instruction not to help others, and Nezumi's thoughts about how restricting humans' relationships are. And now that's all gone. Secondly, because we lose Shion fixing the wound, we also lose A. Shion being actually useful, and B. the I would open the window monologue, plus there was no ruin. That was such important character details, which, sure, we already knew from internal monologue, but Nezumi didn't know that. It's important for Shion to express how much he doesn't regret losing his life in number 6, and for Nezumi to hear that from him. Thirdly, the I'm so glad I met you monologue doesn't work well here. It feels so much like the writers realized they messed up and weren't sure how to fit the monologue in, but knew it was important, so they included some line about Shion thinking himself a good judge of character to segue. It doesn't feel like it's payoff to anything because it just comes out of nowhere. Novel Shion is talking about how much he is driven by emotion right after talking about / doing multiple things driven by emotion. Running out into the dark with the lantern, his confidence in his decision from 4 years ago, yelling and punching a bookcase. These are all things that he's done because of emotion, specifically emotion in relation to Nezumi. We have evidence to back up the claim, but Shion in the anime doesn't do a whole lot, period. So even when the actions he takes are motivated by emotion, this just doesn't feel like an earned payoff. Plus, a big reason this monologue is here is to directly contrast Nezumi's internal monologue. Maybe we should never have met. Maybe one day, Shion, you'd come to think so. Without that, it doesn't add to the emotional impact. The parallels. It's not a dichotomy. It's juxtaposition, that's the word. Fourthly, I hate the decision to have them talking about Safu during this scene. Why can't they be talking about each other, caring for each other, fighting each other? It's so weird to make the scene about someone else when the original scene is entirely about Nezumi and Shion's relationship. Like, actually insane. Finally, for this scene, they completely cut out Nezumi crying. That was an important moment, even if it wasn't grand. Crying isn't something that Nezumi does. The novel even states that he's forgotten what it's like to cry. A very important fact that the anime mostly forgets is that Nezumi loses his perfect control and composure, especially of his emotions, when he's around Shion. It's not cute and romantic, it's scary for him. Not being in control of your emotions is the difference between life and death. If someone can leverage your emotions to harm you, you have failed, you have lost, and it will cost you your life. Okay, so the next scene is in the chapter after the stuff I just talked about. Shion sneaks out during the night because he's going to go to the correctional facility, and Nezumi follows him. When Nezumi reveals his presence to Shion, he decks him in the face. Shion's obviously like, what was that for? And I want to read out the sections of the novels because I really like it. Get yourself up if you have time to be asking questions. Next one's coming! The tip of Nezumi's boot swung straight towards him. Shion instinctively rolled to the side. Don't just stop there. Keep moving, keep the flow. A kick landed firmly in Shion's ribs. His breath caught in his throat. He blindly grasped a handful of pebbles that littered the grassy patch. Don't close your eyes. Don't look away from your opponent's attacks. Move! Okay, so Nezumi is so obviously in the wrong here, but it adds to his character. Even when he's, like, physically attacking Shion, he's still making the point to give Shion fighting tips. Honestly, I think the scene that this reminds me the most of is the dancing. Step out. Good. You're staying on the beat, and repeat the first steps again. Everything is a performance to Nezumi, be it dancing or fighting. The light-hearted comments are part of the performance. He's also showing Shion how to perform fighting. I also just think the lines are fun. The lines are cut from the anime, obviously, otherwise I won't be talking about them. Nezumi explains that this is punishment for Shion lying and deceiving him, and then he shows Shion Karen's memo about Safu. Then Shion hits Nezumi. That's his punishment for hiding information from Shion, the info being Karen's memo. They get into a bit of an argument, and where Shion says, I want to be equals with you. Gayest thing someone can say, by the way. This scene should be so easy to do correctly. Nezumi says he won't hide stuff from Shion again. I swear within upon my battered cheek. And the scene ends, and we go to a Safu scene. But anime Shion doesn't shut up after he says he wants to be Nezumi's equal. He has this line about how Nezumi looks down upon him and doesn't try to understand him, which, don't get me wrong, is true. But Shion doesn't think that. There's an argument they have about it in Volume 5. It's like, kind of similar? But here in the anime, Shion seems kind of sad. When the novel, during that Volume 5 fight, he is pissed the fuck off. He is done with putting up with Nezumi's BS. And this is really just not what they're going for here. Especially because, like, what does Nezumi say in response to anime Shion? That's bull. You're saying I've been looking down on him? You're the one who doesn't understand how important it was to me when you saved me 4 years ago. Excuse me? Non sequitur much? This is purely so that Nezumi can give a monologue that, if the anime cared about the timeline at all, should have happened in, like, episode 3. This is bad for the obvious reason that it isn't related to the topic at hand. In the novel, Nezumi gives his monologue, which is about how much Shion helped him 4 years ago, because it is directly related to what Shion was saying just beforehand. Nezumi even ends the monologue by saying, So you're right. There are times when people are saved by other people. And you're the one that taught me that. You were the only one that taught me that. The debt I owe you for that is high, unfortunately for me. Nezumi has a line that's altered slightly in the monologue, but it really changes the feeling. He's talking about how close he was to death, how incapable he was. I felt so humiliated. I wondered if the whole reason I was born was just to die in humiliation like this. Don't laugh. The anime cuts out the beginning and the end of that line. I felt so humiliated and don't laugh. Which really I feel like is the most important part of that line. So much of the emotion is cut. Nezumi is a teen boy who obsesses his emotions so much he should honestly win an award because it's so impressive. By only including the lines about dying and humiliation, it seems less like Nezumi is talking about his emotions in that moment, and more like he's calling his 12-year-old self pathetic. And the don't laugh. Nezumi is someone who makes fun of others' emotions all the time. Emotions are a weakness, they're dangerous, showing them is a weakness. It's a cliche belief in media, but it's one he holds strongly and that's extremely clear in the novels. That's part of what makes this moment so impactful. It's one of Nezumi's only moments of vulnerability in the entire series. So it's important that he tells Shion not to laugh at him, because it's difficult for people to understand that others don't react in the same way they do. Nezumi's response to other people's emotions is either to laugh or belittle them, so he thinks by talking about his humiliation, others will also hold him in contempt or look down upon him. And I mean, Nezumi doesn't seem to care that much though. Like, he tells Shion to cut off his life from NO.6, but he doesn't really have that much of an internal conflict over opening up his emotions. It's up pretty early on, when novel Nezumi, even as soon as like the end of Volume 7, hates other people being able to read him and know what he's feeling. The anime also changes his final line. The debt I owe you for that is high, unfortunately for me. They can't have that line because it portrays Nezumi as harsher, which he is. That's the same reason the line he says after that is also cut. Don't get too carried away. I'm giving you the guest treatment because I owe you. If you get too carried away and start acting cocky, I'm gonna kick you out. His words become brusque because he cannot be too kind or too open. It's a defense mechanism. But they cut off those bits at the end, and have him keep going with the sappy stuff. I couldn't forget it, couldn't push it away. That's why I am who I am now. I'm sorry, what? I have never heard a less Nezumi sentence in my life. Probably Nezumi's biggest conflict in the entire series is the fact that Shion has an effect on him, and he can't accept that. Shion influences his actions, his morals. He makes Nezumi question whether or not the things he's doing are okay. He's incredibly firm in his beliefs. Now, that was wavering. So many of the choices he makes are in order to assure that no one else has an influence over his life. When you grow attached to people, you can't cut them away and they become shackles that hold you down. So you must not grow attached, because then you're not in control over your own life. And these shackles may also make you question yourself. Are you really in the right? Maybe you have some self-reflection to do. You have to cut away the shackles so that they do not change you as a person. So I feel like it's very clear why this sentiment doesn't fit within his character. But even more so than that, he would just never say it even if it were true. They cut out lines showing how much Nezumi doesn't like opening up so that they could have him open up even more. Seriously? And then, at the very end of the episode, Nezumi says, "There's something I want to show him," and then leads Shion away so that Nezumi can show him something next episode. You want to know where they're going? Nezumi's going to reveal information about his past and the home he lived in as a child. We're going to get Nezumi's traumatic backstory in the next episode. Yay! I have to say that the events that happen in the next episode in the novels happen out of necessity. Nezumi only reveals his traumatic backstory because it's directly related to the conversation at hand, but it's not something he particularly wanted to do. And in the anime, it's because there's something he wants to show Shion. Wait, Nezumi doesn't open up just for the sake of it. I think the reason this was included like this is for trying to get Shion and Nezumi to fit the shoujo formula. Studio Bones likes the idea of the naive, sunshine morality pet ex a secretive bad boy who's only vulnerable with their morality pet. Studio Bones likes the idea of a naive, sunshine morality pet shipped with a secretive bad boy who's only vulnerable with their morality pet. And so they saw that Shion is naive and that Nezumi is secretive and mean, and tried to fit these characters into these tried and true tropes. The issue, though, is that Shion doesn't stay a naive sunshine, and Nezumi isn't just the aesthetic of a bad boy, he's an actual murderer who is nice to nobody, not even Shion. So they flatten out the characters. Instead of fandom watering down a very complex MLM relationship to the happy one and the sad one, Studio Bones did it for us. They can't give Shion any of his character development, where he becomes tougher at the cost of his mental stability and morality, and they can't give Nezumi too much of his harsh cruelty and mistreatment, because then people can't put themselves in Shion's shoes and live out their romantic fantasy with the bad boy who's only nice to them. They watered down probably my favourite ship ever for the sake of shipping culture. And so I think I've identified one of the main issues with Shion and Nezumi's relationship specifically. Studio Bones picked the wrong piece of media to adapt. They wanted a cute BL that girls will fawn over, and saw that No.6 had a romantic relationship deeply ingrained into the plot and character progression, and saw that the story was aimed at girls, and said, hell yeah! But No.6 isn't a cute BL. It's a sci-fi dystopia about the crimes of the government and the horrors of war. But Studio Bones just tried to slide that bit under the rug, and only focus on the good. Ironically, something Nezumi criticizes others for doing within the story of No.6. The only reason you don't know about how awful the government is because you never wanted to know, never cared about knowing, just ignored the dystopia. And Studio Bones ignored the dystopia. That was heavy. There is a character that influences Nezumi so deeply and shapes his hate of love that is entirely cut. His grandmother. Not a biological one, but an old woman who raised him from the ages of 4 to 10. She exists only in his memory, his thoughts, but you can see exactly how she shaped him to become who he is. In Volume 2, we learn what her dying words were. Never sigh in earnest. Never cry. You'll be taken advantage of by demons. Sighing creates an opening of vulnerability. If you want to live, keep your mouth shut. Never let anyone see your weak spot. Let your heart warm to no one. Never trust anyone but yourself. So much can be learned about Nezumi from these words that he didn't even say, he heard. They were his grand's dying words, how could he forget them? It also connects to the fact that Nezumi clicks his tongue all the time, as a replacement for sighing. It's also fun to examine every time that Nezumi does sigh, to see how vulnerable he's becoming. Weak, one might say. I'm not one, but one might. The narration in Volume 7 repeats her words, and also comments on how they affected Nezumi. He had been taught over and over. Each word, each letter was carved deeply into his heart, like a mantra, like a curse. He's so good. Such beautiful poetic writing. And so it makes sense why Nezumi's so distant, and why he tells such similar things to Shion. It's his mantra. It's his curse. In the same part, in Volume 7, you see Nezumi respond to his gran in his mind. Forgive me, Gran. I've gone against what you told me. I've sighed many times for another. I believed him and I opened my heart to him. I placed the shackles around my own feet. But I couldn't have done otherwise. I couldn't have cut him away. Even after he's become emotionally attached to Shion and he's admitted it, he still views it as a failure on his part. Forgive me, he says. He's done something wrong, committed a sin that must be atoned for. It's so good! It's so good, and by the anime cutting the sighing, it makes Nezumi a way worse character because you don't understand why he is the way he is, when it's very obvious in the novels, because he was taught to be this way by someone he cared about. That's not a whole ton I want to say about episode 8. No, they didn't change a lot. It condenses pretty much the entirety of Volume 6 into 20 minutes. They changed so much. It's just a lot of the same old. Cutting important character moments because they haven't done any of the work to earn them. Removing all the personality from main 2 and changing lore. I'm going to skip a lot of it. There's a scene actually at the end of Volume 5, but it leads right into Volume 6. That was cut and was pretty important. So there's this guy Sasori, and he tries to kill Nezumi, and he almost succeeds because Shion and Nezumi went through a lot of stuff in Volume 5 that makes him physically and mentally exhausted. Shion is like, no you don't, and tries to kill Sasori back in order to save Nezumi, which works at saving Nezumi, and he even remains not a murderer, because Nezumi gets upset at him and snaps him out of it. Nezumi tells Shion, I want you to stay as you are. He doesn't want Shion to become a murderer. Anyways, this is an important stepping stone in both Shion's and Nezumi's becoming my narrative foil over the course of the story arc. But Sasori was cut as a character, and so of course this scene was cut too. It makes it even weirder in this episode when Nezumi says, despite his looks, he's quite ferocious, in reference to Shion, because he doesn't say that in the novels, but it's actually kind of true. But you move over to the anime where Shion's a pathetic loser who couldn't hurt a fly even if he wanted to. Ferocious where?
So, I realised while editing that there was more that I wanted to say that I should have said but didn't think of when I was originally writing the script, and so I'm just going to improv it now, which is that when I was talking about when Shion and Nezumi get into a fight because Shion lies, there's something I should have said about Nezumi's abusive tendencies, which is that because he claims that what he's doing is punishment, he's establishing with Shion that physical violence is an appropriate punishment, an appropriate way to react when someone does something that you don't like. And so here, it's more important that they cut Sasori, because that was really important part of not just Shion's but Nezumi's character arc. They influence each other, and Shion is learning from Nezumi, oh, punishment is an okay thing to do. And so here in the end of volume 5, I'll read it out to you. This is what Shion says when Nezumi is like, why did you do that to Sasori? Why'd you try to kill him? It's punishment. What? This is punishment. Punishment? What do you mean? That man tried to kill you, so he paid the penalty. Shion, I do the same thing again. If that man tries to kill you, I'll do the exact same thing. It's clear Shion has taken to heart the idea that punishment is an acceptable idea, and this is extremely distressing to Nezumi. He's horrified at the fact that Shion, of all people, would do something like that, and it shows the way that he realizes the mistakes in his actions through seeing them reflected in Shion. He's already beginning to understand that oh, maybe I have some issues that I should fix, but it becomes even more so when he's influenced Shion and he sees that reflected back, and he sees how much he doesn't like it when Shion does it, which ties back into volume 4 that I don't want to see it, and also volume 7 that I don't want to see it. But that's an essay for another day. I mean, actually could... Shut up. It could actually very well be this essay, but I didn't make it this essay. I should just write another essay about I don't want to see it and why it's the best thing ever, like that quote.
Anyway, they go into a cave and talk to this guy named Ro, who raised Nezumi from the ages of 10 to 12, and they get a bunch of lore about this chick named Eliurias. Remember that name? Oh my god, it's important. Eliurias is a great sovereign, and we get Nezumi's traumatic backstory. Plus, Ro helped found No.6. He was a scientist, and he gives Shion a computer chip that has all his research about everything on it. That's the important plot stuff for the episode. I think this episode is the holotype specimen of cutting out Shion character development. In the novel, Shion is talking to Do and is basically tell me the truth about everything. I needed to rescue Safu, and I've averted my eyes to the truth this whole time, and I don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. Please tell me. But then he cuts himself off, because he decorated his words. He wasn't lying, but the way he phrased it made it seem like his desire is so pure and out of the goodness of his heart, when a big part of the reason he wants to know is because he's intrigued. He wants to know just for the sake of knowing it. So he cuts off and tries to rephrase it in a slightly more honest way. In the anime, he just states his decorated words, and that's the end of the story. He has no self-reflection. He doesn't try to correct his mistake at all. I like self-reflection. It's one of Shion's main character traits. He hates himself, and is constantly trying to figure out how to improve all the flaws he constantly confronts in himself. But here he just doesn't. The anime acts like he has no flaws to confront. Also, I mentioned how there's the part when we get Nezumi's traumatic backstory. Yeah, well, for some reason they decide that Ro should be the one to give Nezumi's traumatic backstory. And he just doesn't care. Yeah, I'm fine with my godfather telling my roommate about all my trauma and not asking me first. Me, Mr. I don't want anyone to know anything about me. It's so bad.
Anyways, quick summary of the backstory. He was part of a culture of people who worshipped Eliodias, or more accurately, they lived in harmony with her, but she had magic powers and stuff, so number 6 burned down the forest they lived in so that they could get Eliodias' powers for themselves. And everyone except Nezumi died. In the novels, Nezumi's gran saved him, and that's how he survived, and that's also how she became his gran. Also in the novels, the song that Nezumi hears when he faints is supposed to be a song for her. It appeases her, makes her not want to smite everyone with her magic powers. But in the anime, it's just her song. She's the one who sings it. It's weird and changes the lore in ways I don't understand or like. This is a part of the novels where Nezumi finally reveals his scar, something that Shion and the audience were not aware of before. And the anime cuts it out. They cut out this really beautiful moment of Nezumi talking about himself and his past, having Ro talk about Nezumi's past for him, and then don't talk about Nezumi's scar at all. Even though it's here that we should have learned about it in the first place. Guess Nezumi's only allowed to remove his shirt when it isn't plot relevant. Also, I want to mention the site I watched the show on allows comments, and on this episode someone commented, "Can they kiss again?" And I found that hilarious. I would say they have their priorities straight, but they actually seem kinda gay. Wait, okay, so I was gonna be done recording, but then I was like, wait, I really want to film this intermission. So, as you can probably tell, I've been reading this entire video from a script, which is why I haven't been looking at the camera. Sorry about that. Everything's written from a script, including the intermissions. The note, what it says for this intermission is just rant about people not getting the genre right. Because I have a lot of thoughts. So, number 6 is a sci-fi, dystopia, mystery, kind of. Those are the genres that Wikipedia lists it as. In so many places, if you look at the list of genres that number 6 is, you will so frequently find listed as BL or Shonenai. I have nothing against BL or Shonenai. I like a lot of them. I'll put a bunch on screen for you. Number 6 is not one. I understand that maybe in this video, I'm focusing too much on the romantic aspects of it because, I really enjoy them. And that's a lot of what the story messed up that is easy to talk about, because I'm specifically talking about, or trying to talk about in this video, the way that the anime messed up the characters, specifically the main 2 characters, not necessarily the plot, even though there's a lot of things I could talk about how they ruined the plot. So I'm probably focusing a bit too much on the gay than the dystopian, but I would like to say the dystopian elements and the political commentary are really important. They are the reason that the story was made. The story was made because of Asano Itsuko, the author, was inspired after hearing about the 9/11 terrorist attacks on the news. This is a story about society and about politics. And I think that the anime didn't realize that. And so I'm, honestly, if someone wanted to label, the anime as a BL or Shonenai, I honestly don't care, because it kind of is. The romantic aspects are deeply ingrained into the story, but that is how all stories should be when characters have relationships. If your 2 main characters are a mother and a daughter, then that, paternal and child relationship should be heavily ingrained into the story and everything the characters do. That's just what good character writing is. Actually, the same thing happens in number 6. Shion and Karan, his mother, a lot of their character arcs and the plot and everything they do is ingrained with the fact that they are a child and a parent. That's just what good character writing is. And I think it's really unfair that things get labeled as a romance if that heavily ingrained relationship happens to be romantic. I'm trying to think of a good example. We as a society don't have genres that are talking about a character's relationship unless that relationship is romantic. There's no
friendship genre. There's no familial genre. Those all just kind of fall into like the slice of life category. But I think that there should be. These types of relationships are equally important. Actually, no, more important than romance, I would say, as an aromantic. Like, almost everyone in their life is gonna have some kind of relationship with friends and some kind of relationship with family. They're like, humans are social creatures and we need relationships, especially those kinds. And so I think it's like, you can tell that this wasn't scripted. Let's think about like MHA, My Hero Academia. Midoriya and All Might have like a mentor and student relationship going on. Pretend that that was a genre that we had. Along with romance, we have the genre of mentor and student, and we have the genre of familial. We have a genre for each relationship type. That wouldn't change My Hero Academia's genre. It would still be like a superhero action. The fact that there is a mentor and there is a student doesn't make that the main focus of the story, even though it is heavily ingrained into the story and affects all the aspects of the story. And so I think take that and apply it to number 6. Yes, there are romantic aspects of the characters' relationships, and yes, it's heavily ingrained into the story, but that's because that doesn't change the genre. That is not the main focus of the story. The story is not focused on specifically the characters' relationships, or at least that was not the intention when writing. What I'm trying and failing to say is more things should be written like number 6. Something having a romantic relationship does not need to make it a romance, and I think that more stories that have romantic subplots, they shouldn't be subplots. They should affect the story in very fundamental ways. You can make it like come to the front a lot without it being a romance, and that's the issue. A BL is a romance. Number 6 is not one of those. I hope this rambling was good and stuff. Episode 9 is the only episode I had never seen when I decided to make this video. All I knew was I adapted this scene with the character called Fura-sama, aka chapters 1 and 2 from volume 4. And that he also adapts the hunt. What is the hunt, you ask? Well, you'll find out, because the anime decided to wait a really long time before they introduced it as a plot point. The very beginning of the episode is pretty accurate to the novels. One of Ikiga's customers, who is a high-ranking official in number 6, comes to have some fun with women. He's named Fura. Inukashi is forced to play the bait, pretending to be a prostitute for a short period of time, and Shiona and Nezumi are supposed to come out and get Fura from where they're hiding. Basically, they take too long to come out, and Inukashi gets very molested. This is something that also happens in the novels, but in the anime they make it like gratuitous. I can't have Shion making witty comebacks, but I can watch a child be sexually harassed for 40 seconds. Thanks, Studio Bones. Anyways, Inukashi gets reasonably upset. Anyone would be scared, but the anime leaves out how young Inukashi is. They seem to be about the same age as Nezumi and Shion in the anime. We don't really have a reason to believe that they're any younger. But in the novel, especially in this scene, they make a point of saying that they are significantly younger than the other two. In a scene that takes place 2 years after this, a random woman on the street asks how old Inukashi is. 12? 13? She asks. And that is 2 years after this scene. So here they are possibly as young as 10. Shion and Nezumi messed up here, and Shion apologizes to Inukashi because if he didn't, he would be the worst. Inukashi stormed out of the room and Shion follows, which doesn't happen in the novels, which is odd.
But other than that, the scene is very true to the original. Or it was. While Inukashi and Shion are talking, Rikiga comes out and says he's saying he'll tell us all kinds of things. End of scene. The novel scene goes on for another chapter and a half and involves Nezumi physically torturing Furda in order to get information out of him, and it doesn't work. And then Shion going like, what the hell, dude? You can't do that? I don't want you to. Hey, Furda, I'll treat the wounds Nezumi gave you if you're willing to give us information. And then it works for Shion. The point of this scene was to show how violent and brutal Nezumi can be, and show how kindness can only just be like kinder, but also be more effective in getting your goals. They also cut out everything with I don't want to see it, and all of Shion's disgust and hatred of himself for not being more like Nezumi. But giving Shion a better self-esteem seems to be a big theme in the anime. Also, in this scene, Nezumi literally holds a knife to Shion's throat. Like, so much happens here. And I think I know why they cut it, because they already tried to give Nezumi his character arc. He hasn't really had much development by this point in the novels, but by this point in the anime, they've already given him his traumatic backstory and stuff, so having him like threaten Shion with a knife wouldn't work very well for the sweet relationship they're trying to portray, as opposed to the novel, which contains the toxicest of yaois. Anyway, Anime Shion mentions that Furda said something about something called a cleaning day. He asks what it is, and Nezumi just brushes him off. Nezumi also tells him to memorize a map of the inside of the correctional facility that Furda gave them. Every sensor, every door, everything memorized. In a scene in the library vault, Shion asks Nezumi a question about the plan. He says that Nezumi went to visit Inu and Rikiga, and so he's basically figured out that Nezumi's not telling him what the plan is. And he says, I get it. I'll be waiting. Believing in you. Who is that? 'Cause it's not fucking Shion. I don't want the protagonist who is a kind, perfect cinnamon roll. I want the Shion who cannot do something if he does not know why he is doing it. I want the Shion who will work for an answer until he has it in its entirety. I want the Shion that's sarcastic, and I want the Shion that's an insane little freak sometimes. I want the Shion who would kill if it meant Nezumi was safe. I want the Shion who is capable. I want the Shion who hates himself, who believes he will never be anything more than a burden. I want the Shion who believes his own suffering to be punishment for the fact that he is not enough, that he cannot save the world, that society will never be perfect. I want the Shion who idolizes Nezumi like a god. I want the Shion who confronts himself every single day and sees the flaws that he then works to fix. I want the Shion who yearns so deeply he calls it painful. I want the Shion I know back. I want the Shion I care about back. Whatever. The hunt comes, also known as Cleaning Day, mentioned earlier. The No. 6 military takes out a bunch of the West Block citizens and buildings with sonic weapons, and then Nezumi, Shion, and a bunch of other people get taken in vans to the correctional facility. While in the vans, Nezumi expresses a request for Shion not to change too much. After all, he's probably going to see a lot of traumatizing stuff in the correctional facility, and then everyone gets dumped out into vans into a big pit. I could talk about the stuff that the anime changes. I have stuff to say, it's just not worth it. I know what's coming in the next 2 episodes, and I don't see the point in wasting your time, because there are big issues coming up soon. That was emotional. The first episode of the No. 6 anime came out July 8th, 2011, less than a full month after the release of the final volume, the light novels. This explains why everything we're about to talk about is rushed and cuts a lot of content from page to screen. It also explains why the endings from page to screen are very different. They Scott Pilgrimed it. They gave a ton of focus to the stuff that happened in the beginning, and then panicked and rushed in the second half. The difference here is that I like Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. I don't know much about the production of No.6, but judging by the fact that it definitely started before the story was done, and because the story itself is condensed into only 11 episodes, and because I know about the Japanese animation industry, I assume it was probably rushed in the name of money. It's really common for animators to be overworked, and stories are put out before completion so the people up top can make money quicker. I cannot say for certain whether it is true that this is why the No.6 anime is like this, but it's another conspiracy theory of mine. Episode 10 adapts all of Volume 5 and 7, so we're already off to a bad start. They cut out pretty much everything that happens with Nezumi and Shion in Volume 5. That's not an exaggeration. They have 3 minutes of screen time that shows events that took place in Volume 5. While there are many moments that I'm obviously upset they removed, there are two that I want to talk about because they come back later in my analysis of the second half of this episode. The first is a scene where, in the basement of the correctional facility, a man is dying. He is suffering and begs to be killed so that he can get it over with quickly. Shion wants to, he always wants to help after all, and he tries to choke the man to death. But he can't. He's physically exhausted and cannot put the strength into his fingers to do it. So Nezumi steps in. He says that Shion isn't fit for the role of executioner. So Nezumi sings a song to carry away the man's soul and kills him. Both of them believe the other to be in the right. They both feel like they did something wrong. Shion feels guilty. He wishes he could have been the one to help the man. And Nezumi says that the man didn't deserve to have a peaceful death. That he should have loathed and cursed his unfair death, and he shouldn't have gasped for his last breath, writhing in pain. They fight over this some more, but the most important thing here for our purposes is that Shion tried to mercy kill someone and failed. The next thing that happens a bit later. Shion is pretty much unable to carry himself. He says that he will never be anything more than a burden, and that Nezumi should just leave him, that Nezumi can do it better on his own. Nezumi points out that dying isn't going to be easy. It's going to be slow, painful, and Shion could possibly lose his sanity down in the basement. How are you going to kill yourself here without a knife to slash your throat, without a rope to hang yourself? And Shion responds, "You've got a knife." So that's what you meant. Nezumi convinces Shion to survive, not through any "life is so worth living" speech. Nezumi would never give one of those. But by saying that he had Shion memorize the inside of the correctional facility for a reason, and if Shion is going to die, it's going to be in a time and place that won't inconvenience Nezumi. Now, it's very clear from reading that Nezumi doesn't want Shion to die, period. But he also knows that Shion's suicide is not his choice to make. It's Shion's. More stuff happens, but just make sure to keep these moments in your head for later. They get into the main building and need disguises. If they walk around in their street clothes, they'll be caught immediately. In the novel, they kill 2 guys, lock their bodies in a closet, and steal their clothes. Like highway bandits, to quote Shion's internal monologue. They also do a bit of flirting here, because they've never heard of wrong place, wrong time. In the anime, instead of murder, they just find a clothing locker and steal the clothes from there. It takes away a lot of the pressure and moral ambiguity when the main characters don't have to dirty their hands at all. And the moral ambiguity is one of the best parts of the entire series, especially in volumes 5 and 7 specifically. Also, they don't flirt in the anime. What they do have is Shion actually being useful for once in his goddamn life. He shows that he successfully memorized the layout of the correctional facility and is able to apply that knowledge. Strangely enough, Nezumi is surprised by this piece of information, though maybe it's not actually that strange when considering that anime Shion hasn't gone to flex his skill yet the way he already had in the novels. But it's still annoying, especially when in a scene in Volume 5, Nezumi has the quote, "If it's about your memorization skills, then I have absolute faith in that." And in the adaptation, he's like dumbfounded when Shion is able to use this ability even once. Very telling to how unhelpful Shion is in the anime. Okay, so you know how Nezumi's an actor by trade? And how in the novels he quotes Shakespeare and other classic plays like every chance he gets? Well, there's a scene where they're pretending to be workers, obviously, they steal lab coats, and Shion comes up with a good lie as to explain to someone who actually works there why they're going somewhere they're not supposed to. Shion is unfortunately unable to come up with a good ending to the lie, so Nezumi does it for him. He's an actor after all, he can lie. In the anime, instead of taking the chance to perform, which he loves to do,
He punches the man they are speaking to in the gut. Why? What? That would probably result in the man yelling, and there are many people around. However, they somehow just don't notice the man keeling over in pain and Nezumi and Shion running away from the area. Not only is it less in character, it simply shouldn't be as effective as it ends up being. It doesn't make sense from a plot or storytelling perspective. Anyways, if I may steal more of your time than I already have, I would like to explain the events of my favourite chapter in the entirety of number 6, that I may explain the differences from novel to anime. Chapter 4, Volume 7, entitled, Are You Sad? The beginning of the chapter actually doesn't matter here, because that's to do with a plot point that gets completely cut. And I'm talking a big plot point. It's lore important. Shion and Nezumi are in a room with a bunch of different security guards, but Nezumi does a good job of taking most of them down, so everything's mostly fine. Until, that is, one of them steps forward. It's Tadashi, who you may or may not remember from the very long time ago in the section on episode 2. They do a small amount of talking before Tadashi points a gun and shoots Nezumi in both the shoulder and leg. Shion catches him from behind and supports him. And I quote, The barrel of Tadashi's gun was pointed straight at Nezumi's heart. Shion's arm slid around his chest from behind as if he were trying to protect him. Nezumi placed his hand on top. Shion's arm was covered in dirt and blood. I see, so I am going to die with you. He leaned back onto Shion and let out a long breath. The tension left his body. But he would not close his eyes. He would behold the world before him with a steady gaze until his last moments. Shion's arm tightened around him. I won't close my eyes, not until the last moment. He heard a gunshot right beside him. It were a muffled sound as if he were underwater. Red flowers bloomed on Dashi's shirt. Petals flew all around. What? Dashi staggered back a few steps before leaning heavily with his back against the wall. He slid to the ground. Crimson petals also flooded from his lips. Nezumi drew a breath but could not release it. Those aren't flower petals. It's blood. I could dissect so much from this chapter. I could talk for hours about why it's so perfect, and I'm willing to if people want me to. But for now, you have the important information for the discussion we're having right now. Shion stands up and walks towards Tadashi. He's obviously writhing in pain. I'm going to cut some of the lines from the next bit for convenience's sake, but you'll get the important parts. Hurry, put me to rest. Save me. Save you? Shion's shoulders twitched. I heard those same words just earlier, in the basement of this building. You people threw this man into the basement. He was a victim of the hunt. He couldn't die, so he came begging to me. Help me, he said. When this man was writhing in agony, what were you doing? Drinking coffee? Taking a bath? Giving a lecture? I couldn't save him. I couldn't save anyone. Shion's right arm rose slowly. Shion, stop! A gunshot rang out. Nezumi passes out and sees the grassy scene again with the song. When he wakes up, Shion is repeating the same phrase over and over again. I can't save anyone. When Nezumi calls his name, he snaps out of it and is immediately filled with joy and relief. Everything is okay as long as Nezumi's okay, right? He sees Nezumi's wounds and immediately takes off his sweater and tears it to bind them. But Nezumi knows Shion. He knows that Shion won't be able to handle it when he properly, fully realizes what he's done. You protected me. Don't forget that. You protected me. He needs Shion to not blame himself for what he did. He needs to tell Shion this preemptively because he knows Shion. They get into an argument. Nezumi says that if Shion didn't do what he had, then he would be the one sitting on the ground with a bullet in his head and a stopped heart. But Shion cannot justify it to himself as he becomes fully aware of everything that just happened. Nezumi, Shion murmured hoarsely, I killed him. He got up and picked the handgun off the floor. I don't know how, but without any hesitation at all, I was able to just
kill another human being. Their eyes met. Is that forgivable? Is that something that's allowed to be forgiven? The mere 5.4mm diameter of the barrel seemed so large to his eyes. You said once that number 6 and I were very similar. I said you were wrong, but maybe you were right. I am like that city. It doesn't matter why I did it. I coldly, ruthlessly wrenched a man's life from him. Nezumi. Total length, 155mm. Weight, 460 grams. Shots equipped, 8. Rifling, 4 grooves, clockwise. How many shots are left? Can I be forgiven? Shion closed his eyes. Nezumi tackles him. He can't let Shion shatter his own skull. He screams at Shion, enraged that he would dare try to hurt something so important to him. Nezumi realizes that they never should have come to the correctional facility. Shion may have come to help Safu, but Nezumi came for his own selfish reasons. After all, getting inside such an important government building would be the perfect opportunity to take number 6 down from the inside. But he dragged Shion into his battle. He used Shion's perfect memorization skills for his own destructive goals, and that was a huge mistake. But it's already happened. There's nothing to be done about it. Shoulder it, he whispered. The words tore through his gritted teeth and spilled from his lips. Shion's eyes moved slowly. They narrowed slightly, as if attempting to focus on Nezumi. Shoulder it. Shoulder it and live on. They were words for himself, not Shion. Bear your sin and live. Shion, I'm sorry. I made you bear the burden, one so big it's making your spine creak. Would I be forgiven one day? Would you forgive me for what I did to you? Shion let out a long breath. An arm reached out, and a set of fingertips touched Nezumi's cheek. It's my first time seeing you cry. Huh? Cry? Who? It's alright, Nezumi. Don't cry. I get it. I'll do as you say, so just don't cry, please. Idiot, Nezumi said hoarsely. Really, how idiotic can you get? Still caring for others in a situation like this? What's alright? Nothing's alright. Besides, I'm not crying. I'm not like you. I don't just let my tears fall wherever and whenever I want, without hesitation. He had reached his limit. He couldn't hold it any longer. A wave of tears overcame him, and they streamed from his eyes. The droplets were startlingly hot. They rolled down his cheeks, dripped from the point of his chin, and landed on top of Shion. It's his second time crying in the entire story. Both times happen when Shion tries to leave Nezumi in some way. The first time is by going to the correctional facility on his own, a suicide mission. And the second time is through an actual suicide attempt. The chapter continues, but how about we get back to the episode? Dashi isn't a character that actually exists in the anime. The man that ends up dying is a random guard. Fine, whatever. That is the thing I care least about in this scene. Nezumi gets shot, but here he and Shion are on completely opposite sides of the room. Shion cannot catch him and he just crumples to the ground. Nezumi isn't going to die in Shion's arm. The line, "I see, so I'm going to die with you," has to be cut from Nezumi's internal monologue as a result. That was one of my favourite lines. I guess there's a pattern of my favourite lines being cut. All the intimacy is gone because of it. The lines, he leaned back onto Shion and let out a long breath. The tension left his body. And Shion's arms tightened around him. Right before the gunshot gave such a visceral and intimate feeling that would have worked so well in a TV show. Have an entire shot that is just Nezumi breathing. Have an entire shot that's just Shion's arm tightening. It would work so well to give this soft, gentle moment that takes its own time and allows the audience just to breathe when you think it's going to be the end of them. Then you hear the gunshot. Put that moment from Nezumi's perspective. You can see his hair fall on his face. Cut to a shot that is just Nezumi's facial expression as he sees Tadashi get shot, trying to figure out what just happened. And then he turns to look at Shion and figures it out. I'm trying to be helpful here. I'm giving advice. But of course, the anime does none of this. There's all this tense music, and Shion slowly walks up to the man who's been shot and hears Nezumi call out to him not to do it. Nezumi tells him not to do in the novel, but it's only after Shion has already raised his arm, after it's already too late. The anime is unable to give Shion his monologue about being unable to save the man in the basement, so instead they replace those beautiful, beautiful lines with just one line. How dare you do that to Nezumi? I hate this show so much. I feel like a bad video essayist because I couldn't even tell you why this is wrong for Shion's character. It just is. When I said I wanted the Shion who would kill if it meant Nezumi was safe, this isn't what I meant. Nezumi doesn't faint. He doesn't go back to that grassy field. Probably because the grassy field isn't a childhood memory in the anime. Nezumi apologizes. It's all my fault. I burdened you with this. He's already crying by this point and doesn't try to hold back the tears at all. I understand that they have to get across Nezumi's regret somehow, but having him voice his thoughts is not the way to do it. We see Nezumi struggle so much figuring out the right words to say in this scene, and how this realization dawns on him the way he messed up, which can be communicated with some good cinematography and internal monologue. You don't have to include all of it, but by having Nezumi voice his thoughts that he's struggling to sift through, like it or not, you're writing a different character. Shion comes to comfort him. It's alright, Nezumi, it wasn't your fault. Again, I don't have anything to say other than the fact that it just feels wrong. Nezumi doesn't get offended when Shion tells him not to cry. Shion rubs his wounds here. If you were paying attention, you would realize that there was a distinct lack of fighting and a distinct lack of a suicide attempt. This is the reason I brought up Shion's suicidal ideation earlier when he requests Nezumi's knife. They completely remove it. After he heals Dashi, he's just fine. He's back to normal. He's upset about it for a little bit, but there are never any consequences. It never goes anywhere. I'm seriously at a loss for words. Never before in this essay have I been so unable to explain why it is wrong. Hopefully I don't have to. Hopefully I can just talk about the final episode and be done with this video. Hopefully you guys can see why I miss Shion's suicidal ideation, his mental health struggles, his moral ambiguity. Moral ambiguity. When Shion and Nezumi fight about whether or not killing Rashi was the right thing to do, it makes the audience ask that question. The less time the anime spends focused on the fact that a man is dead, will never move again, will never see his family again, the less the audience has to confront it. The audience doesn't have to deal with the fact that the protagonists hurt other people, and that they hurt each other, and that not everything they do is always justified. And I think that's one of my biggest issues with the show. I like moral ambiguity. I like it when the media I consume makes me think about the grayscale of the world, not just the black and white. On my desk, right now, sits a figurine of the character Twice from My Hero Academia. He's a murderer, a thief, a villain. He's my favorite character. He cares deeply about his friends and would do anything in order to protect them. He struggles with mental health and seems to have some kind of identity disorder, possibly DID. He's not evil, he never wanted to be a villain, but those at the bottom of society's social rung often get pushed to extreme lengths in order to survive, to find community. Twice is a murderer, a thief, a villain, and my favorite character. Not despite those facts, but because of them. Because he can be all three of those things and still be the kindest character in the story. The show wants you to sympathize with him, praise his acts of courage in helping his villain friends, and still say that the crimes he commits are wrong. He has moral ambiguity. He feels like a person. Okay, so they've made it to the room where Safu is, and she's sitting in front of this big computer called the Mother. It's the facility's main computer. Safu does some lore dumping about stuff in No.6, including, dun dun dun, Eliodias? How does she know about Eliodias? So she gets really confused at all the stuff she's saying, and Nezumi's like, have you really not figured it out yet? She is Eliodias. And I'm like, what? No, she's not. But the anime says, oh yes, she is. It would be really difficult and annoying to explain all the lore stuff with Eliodias, but I'll try to give some cliff notes. this is what the novel's explanation is. So Eliodias is like this giant magic wasp, and when the forest people still existed, they would give her these crushed animal brains to lay her wasp eggs in, so that she doesn't end up laying her eggs inside of people instead. But then they were all killed in that fire by number 6. Now Eliodias has no place to lay her eggs, so she began laying them in people. But the number 6 government also put wasp eggs in people so they can like figure out exactly what Eliodias likes best, so they can get her magic wasp powers and stuff. Safu was supposed to be just another regular sample, someone with the wasp inside of them, and then they get like their brains removed to see just the animal brain and stuff. I'm not explaining it well. But then this guy running all the experiments got really attached to her because he thought she was really pretty and decided to do some different experiments on her so that they could be super powerful together or something. Because of this, Safu was able to like control the basic functions of the mother, but she's really not able to do that much. Safu is also pretty much dead and kind of like inside of the mother. It's like a brain uploaded into a computer type scenario. I'm back again. Okay, so I mentioned very briefly in episode like 6, I think, that Safu has this thing with knitting needles and her grandmother. I'm going to explain this. I know I'm interrupting myself, but I didn't have anywhere better to put it unless I just stuck it at the very end, and I want to talk about when it's relevant. And the relevant information is that Safu has died and has no physical body. Or she has no living physical body. When Safu went on her exchange trip, her grandmother gave her one of her grandmother's knitting needles, but not both of them, so that her grandmother was like, this will connect us, even when we're far apart. So, Safu has one of her grandmother's knitting needles. I mentioned how, in episode 10, the amount of stuff that happens in volume 5 that then gets translated over to episode is pretty much nothing. Pretty much the only thing that they did keep is that they're forced to like climb over a pile of dead bodies, like a mountain of dead bodies, in order to, get around the correctional facility. And I didn't catch this until after I had already finished scripting and recording the video, but you see Shion while he's climbing up grab onto a knitting needle. That is Safu's dead body. And I was like, oh my god, Studio Bones, I have something to compliment you on. This is like my 3rd time. I'm gonna tell you, good job. Maybe it's my 4th, I'm pretty sure it's my 3rd. I only give them like half points because also Safu was not a victim of the hunt, and the dead bodies they're climbing over are specifically the dead bodies of people who were victims of the hunt. So like it doesn't exactly work, but they tried. They had something that if you rewatch it, you'll be like, oh, I didn't notice that. So, good on them. Back to myself. And so she's in a lot of pain and suffering because of her fate, and she wants the mother to be destroyed so that she can be set free. And luckily our protagonist luckily for our protagonist, that will also do bad stuff for number 6 and be very effective in taking it down. Basically, Eliodias used the mother to help Nezumi and Shion reach Safu because Safu wished it really, really hard. I promise it's not as dumb as it sounds when you read it in the novel. I'm just trying to save time so everything's simplified down. But the anime forgot to do a lot of setup for that, and so in the final episode they just say, Safu's Eliodias, don't worry about it. And Eliodias got really mad at number 6 for being so evil, and that's why she put wasps in people. Which is not good. So much emotional impact is lost alongside of the plot. Safu tells Shion that she loves him, and Shion completely crashes out, angsty scream into the sky and everything. Safu says to destroy the mother, and Shion gets super upset and he's like, I'll do it, I'll destroy everything, because he's really upset. But it honestly feels really out of character for him. Not that he doesn't have destructive tendencies in the novels, but it's just that they don't appear here and now. They're sprinkled throughout the story, but here and now in the novel, Shion is completely out of it. His brain is so slow, he's so tired, and he cannot process or accept what is happening in front of him. Nezumi pins Shion to the ground and is like, this is my responsibility. Also, weren't you really anti-destruction? What happened to that? And Shion is like, that was just a naive fantasy. Which makes Nezumi cry a tiny bit. And I know they have this whole narrative foils becoming each other over the course of the story thing that I love going on. But these just aren't the same people.
This is no longer realistic. It's too extreme and it's painful to watch. Anyways, upon hearing this, Nezumi punches Shion in order to get him to stay on the ground so we can put a bomb on the mother and destroy it. And I just... Remember what I said about this being painful to watch? Sasu reasonably asks why he punches Shion, and Nezumi responds, I only wish for Shion to stay as he is. Ew! That makes me so uncomfortable. Like, Nezumi and Shion were toxic in the novels, but not like this. It was more fun and less deeply uncomfortable. I think this feels especially bad because Shion and Nezumi were toxic throughout the entire novels, and it was baked deeply into their characters and dynamics, but this just feels wrong for Nezumi. It doesn't feel like him. Nezumi places a bomb on the mother and drags Shion's body out into the elevator that they just used to get up there. In the novel, Sasu kind of leads them part of the way out and Shion follows her, and because he's in so much denial, he has this entire monologue about how the three of them are escaping together. Yay! And also about how much he yearns to return to the rest block, especially the library vault. He cannot wait to return with his best friend who he loves so dearly, to show her the place and the people that mean so much to him. But in the anime, she doesn't go with them at all, not even part of the way. She just kind of stands there. They kind of cut out the fact that in the novel, Sasu wants the mother to be destroyed so that she can die. She's already mostly dead, and continuing to live like that is so painful for her. It was tragic and beautiful. But here, Sasu's death is nothing more than confusing. When the mother is destroyed, Sasu/Eliorias kind of like disperses. I'm not sure. I'll show you the clip. Because, what is that? When she disperses, all the people who died from the wasps get brought back to life, and the wasps turn into these golden spirals that then go around causing destruction, including the destruction of the wall that separates NO.6 from everywhere else. This is so dumb. Why did everyone come back to life? In the novels, this absolutely does not happen. It doesn't make sense from a scientific perspective, which, like, sure, there's magic, but other than Eliorias being, like, somewhere between Wasp and God, everything else is really scientific. It's sci-fi. The people who suffered because of the government's crimes are still dead. They will never awaken. They will never see their families again. It's a dystopian, as it should be. The world is dystopian. Just one more example of the adaptation trying to make a simple, light-hearted show out of a gory, grim, dystopian series. Because the mother was destroyed, the correctional facility is in pandemonium, having caught on fire. Shion is sitting on the ground. Why did you kill her? We came here to save Safu, not to kill her. Shion and Nezumi get into a whole argument in the novels, and I'm going to focus on those for a little bit. Shion, I can't think of it as you do. We were too late. Safu was already dead. You aren't looking at reality. It would have been impossible to separate her from the mother. She even said so herself. She had no body, but she was still trapped. She said it hurt, that she wanted you to set her free. She wished to be set free from that situation, from her humiliation. As the narration continues, he was not wrong. Shion was the one with the wrong idea. He was unable to accept the reality of losing Safu. He was trying to avert his eyes from the truth. Side note, excellent example of the internal monologue bleeding into the narration. I love the narrator reflects the opinions of whoever perspective the chapter is from. Then Shion says something. You used her. A low mutter. Nezumi did not catch it. He goes on to explain that Nezumi used Safu in order to destroy the mother, but then after that he quickly apologizes. Nezumi, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I know we had no choice but to do it. And then a little later, I got you involved and even dragged Ikiga-san and Inukashi into it. And if the result was this, Nezumi, we didn't come here for destruction. We came here to give salvation. But look! He gets cut off by Nezumi. We came here for destruction. He gives a bit of a monologue. He admits how selfishly he used both Safu and Shion to destroy the correctional facility, and he ends it off by saying, I'm not asking you to forgive me. It's not something I can apologize for and be done with. And I'm gonna pause there. Such a good scene.
Nezumi and Shion fight, already off to a good start. Shion accurately identifies and voices a flaw in Nezumi, but then apologizes because he has a terrible self-worth and always blames himself. But Shion is right, and Nezumi tells him so. Nezumi admits that he done messed up, and even though everything went perfectly for him, he still acknowledges that he should not have done what he did. It's not something I can apologize for and be done with. The anime, unsurprisingly, cuts a lot of that out. As soon as he asks Nezumi why he killed Safu, he immediately asks, "Were you using her?" A question, not a statement. Then he yells, "That's it, you used her!" He's filled with anger, which is so much worse compared to the emotionless stating of facts. He's so dispassionate in the novels, emotionless, numb. But it hits way harder to see someone who's always brimming, even flowing with emotions so cold and empty. Because Nezumi trained him to be so. The ranting about needing to cut away the baggage that his emotions got through to Shion. Also, really ties in with the whole "am I even a person anymore" that gets completely cut out from the anime. But yeah, Shion has a big conflict with himself about how emotions are what makes you a person, and he's becoming so numb while in the correctional facility. And he's like, "I need to stay human," and the anime cuts all that out. He doesn't apologize afterwards. He doesn't break down with guilt. Nezumi doesn't correct Shion. He agrees, because Shion never goes back on his harsh words. Sorry, I said that in a really weird way. What I was trying to say is, in the anime, Shion says all this mean stuff about how you used her, and Nezumi's just like, "Yeah, you're right," which is different from in the novels where Shion says all the mean stuff, then apologizes and says like, "Never mind, that's not true," and Nezumi corrects him and is like, "No, you're right, that is true. I just said it in a bad way." Nezumi does still have his monologue where he admits to using Safu, but it feels much different. Book Nezumi seems glad at how successfully the plan worked out, but also incredibly guilty at the way he used and hurt others to get there. He knows that an apology won't be enough for the hurt he's caused. Anime Nezumi splays his arms out, smiles, and almost plays it like an evil villain monologue. "You figured out my evil plan" thing. At the end, he even says, "What's with that face? It's not as if the two of us were," and then he gets cut off. But wait a minute, because what was that you were gonna say, Nezumi? Huh? The two of you weren't friends? Important to each other? I mean, sure, they weren't friends, but they care about each other so much by this point in the story, and Nezumi would not say that. He's an asshole, but all the cruel things he says aren't just to be mean. They're to make a joke, in order to give advice, in order to be helpful. So why is he being so evil here? It's just so wrong and makes no sense. Moving on. In the anime, Nezumi cuts himself off because he notices a man with a gun running by. They're still inside the correctional facility after all. The man is pointing his gun at Shion, and Nezumi runs to protect him, and Nezumi gets shot. Then we immediately cut to another shot of windmills. Those goddamn windmills. Anyways, so, he does push Shion out of the way to protect him in the novels, but the man wasn't pointing a gun at Shion there. It's almost sweeter like that. Nezumi was the one in danger, but his first instinct was to protect Shion. Also, the novel specifies Nezumi noticed the man too late. Even if he hadn't protected Shion, he wouldn't have had time to save himself. It shows him at a moment of weakness. He's not on top of things. It's nice. I like to see Nezumi make mistakes. To not be perfect all the time. The anime Nezumi notices the man the second he appears. He doesn't make mistakes. He's not a human. In both versions, as soon as Nezumi gets shot, Shion immediately locks in. He runs to find an infirmary and gives some emergency treatment. It does annoy me how one of the only times Shion actually gets to use his skills in the anime, instead of him treating Nezumi's wounds just because Nezumi got hurt, he's treating Nezumi's wounds that Nezumi got protecting him. For some reason, Shion is always a pretty little damsel in distress. They do cut out a moment where Shion is dragging Nezumi out of the correctional facility, and Nezumi is basically like, "Just leave me to die and escape yourself," and Shion calls him an idiot and says not to underestimate him. It's a direct parallel to the scene from Volume 5 where Shion says Nezumi should leave him to die and says, "You've got a knife." Another reason why that scene should not have been cut. The boys' plan is to slide down the garbage chute. There's a really small detail I want to point out. In the novel, Shion puts Nezumi in the chute first and makes sure to hold on to him so he doesn't go flying down, and then comes in afterwards. In the anime, he climbs in and then helps Nezumi up afterwards. This does two things that I do not like. One, Nezumi is unconscious for most of the time after he is shot. He's properly dying. Shion is trying to get out as soon as possible so they can get him proper medical attention from an actual doctor. And he's on a time crunch. By having Nezumi able to get in as long as he has Shion's hand to help him lift himself up, it makes his wounds seem much less disastrous and that there isn't really a time crunch. 2. It takes away Shion literally putting Nezumi first. Nezumi is his priority no matter how much danger he's in himself. There's also something that happens when Shion is reaching out his hand for Nezumi to take. Something that absolutely 100% does not happen in the novels. He gets shot with a gun in the heart. Now, I don't know about you, but most people would die upon being shot in the heart. And Shion is not an exception. I mean, Asano Tsuko did say she was very influenced by banana fish after all. He obviously falls backwards down the garbage chute and Nezumi comes in after him. They arrive at the end of the chute. Rikika and Inukashi have been waiting down there for them. They have their own subplot that's way bigger than the novels, and is pretty short in the anime, but they're helping from the outside of the facility. It doesn't matter, they're there now. Inukashi leaves and drags Rikika with them, as Nezumi crawls over and sits by Shion's corpse. Nezumi lays his superfiber scarf over Shion and begins to sing a song, a dirge. It honestly did make me emotional, but then I went straight back to analytical because there were shots of the magic wasp tornadoes causing destruction over Nezumi's singing in the background, and that was simply not the move. I don't even like the decision to kill Shion, but I have some advice for how they should have done this scene if they were going to anyway. Don't put anything over Nezumi's singing. Let his singing play out in full. Also, maybe pick a different song. They have him sing Eliodias' song, but what they should have done is have him sing more throughout the main story, and then get him to sing one of the other songs from before, one with more of a thematic relevance, either to death or specifically his relationship with Shion. Another option that I'm not as confident on, but I thought was worth mentioning, is to not kill Shion as soon as he gets shot. Kill him in a way that makes him suffer, but still conscious, so that Nezumi's song can start in order to soothe the suffering, the way Inukashi gets him to do for the dogs, but then have him continue to sing the song even after Shion has died. After he finishes singing, he just kind of curls up on the ground next to Shion, which I thought was dumb, but then I remembered he also has 3 bullet wounds, and probably couldn't even leave if he wanted to. He should have contented himself to die with Shion earlier when they were with Dashi, but he does it here instead. But, then a glowing light appears. It's Safu. She holds Shion in her lap and sings him the Eliodia song as well, which is deeply confusing because she doesn't have a physical body and should not be able to touch Shion. So how does he lay in her lap and not just fall through the floor through her legs? Nezumi just kind of stares at her dumbfounded when Safu comes, which, real, I know I would. When she finishes singing, she disperses into golden glitter or something, and then reforms into Eliodias, being a giant rainbow wasp. I don't know either. She explodes into the sky, leaving golden glitter falling from the sky. This, for some reason, fixes Nezumi's bullet wounds, and, I kid you not, brings Shion back to life. I have no words. None. What? They could have just not killed Shion? Literally, what was the point of everything that just happened? You could have made the ending straightforward, instead of adding all this Shion dying BS just to bring him back. What was the point of killing him? What was the point of killing him if it makes no effect to the plot? I'm actually crying. maybe they just realized that they missed out a lot of emotional character moments and I wanted to just throw one in right at the last moment. He literally gets up and is like, I heard Safu singing. Is he aware of the fact that he died? He's so chill about it. What's this like for Nezumi? We now go to the sunset. New scene. That's not getting explained. Shion and Nezumi are just staring at where the wall used to be, reminded that the wasp tornadoes knocked it down. And Nezumi's like, Elias and Safu probably wanted to show you this view, which I suppose is supposed to explain why they brought Shion back to life, but like, Safu is dead. She can't do anything, and Elias literally has no reason to care about Shion. He's some random human. She doesn't care about humans. I had a moment when I was watching this episode and taking notes and being like, wait, okay, so the wall has been taken down, but there's been no societal change? How is this going the end of a dystopian? Sure, the wall is gone, but the number 6 residents haven't realized how much their government sucks, and they didn't try to rise up against it. The wall can easily be rebuilt. There haven't really been any systematic change, and also the mayor didn't die. And then I realized, oh my god, they didn't include the mayor. To my lovely viewers at home who haven't read number 6 or seen one of the better adaptations, you may be asking, who? Who is this mayor you speak of? Well, my dear viewer, thank you very much for asking. He's not that important, a bit of a minor character, you know, he's the main villain. The mayor of number 6 is after complete and utter control of all of the city and all the citizens. He wants unilateral power, and he does not care who he has to hurt in order to get it. In the novel, the people of number 6 try to throw a revolution. They realize the oppression they're under and try to rise up. They don't end up succeeding, but the story is setting up a group of people who will work together to create a more equal society without so much censorship. The mayor ends up killing himself because he's aware that nobody's gonna support him anymore if they've realized how much he sucks. In the anime, none of that happens. We know nothing about the political and social awareness of the citizens, and there hasn't really been any systematic change. They forgot to make any comments about politics in this political commentary. The rest of the scene is adapted from the novel, specifically the very end of the final chapter of Volume 9. If you couldn't tell, Shion getting shot and all consequences because of it are entirely anime original. A week has passed since, it all went down in the novel. The novel has done a good job of establishing that Nezumi is a wanderer. He doesn't like sticking around somewhere just for the sake of it. The anime also cuts this out, but Shion promised Sasu that he would stay in number 6 and fix it. Fix the injustice and rebuild a better, kinder place. So, you have the necessary context. It's been a week. Nezumi has packed a bag and decided to go on his own little hero's journey. Shion begs Nezumi not to leave, but Nezumi says that he can't, that's not who he is. So Shion begs him to allow Shion to join him, but Nezumi says he can't. Shion has a job to do here, he promised Safu, and promises are big things. Why can't gay people just be normal and say I love you? They have to be all dramatic and say something dumb like the world means nothing to me without you. Nezumi kisses Shion, and essentially says that they'll see each other again at some point, someday, probably, and walks off into the distance. Tragic. But it makes sense for both their characters. Let's see how the anime does this iconic scene, why don't we? I'm sure they'll do it perfectly and not do anything to irritate me, right? The first immediate change is that the scene hasn't changed. A week has not passed. Nezumi doesn't have a pack of supplies and food the way he does in the novels, and he's even still wearing his blood-stained clothes. Anime Nezumi is probably gonna die in a few weeks from starvation if the dehydration doesn't get to him first. He did not think this out well. Second, after kissing Shion, he does not get his famous line, "Reunion will come," and instead just says, "You'll be fine," which, okay, whatever. But it's even worse that Shion just nods. He's just like, yeah, okay, I'll be fine. I'm okay with Nezumi leaving me like this out of the blue. Where is the begging? Where is the emotional dependency? Not that Shion places an unhealthy amount of his self-worth and emotional well-being on Nezumi, but here that's just gone. What happened to the world means nothing to me without you. I guess gay people can be normal when it's just a shitty anime adaptation. And then Nezumi's just gone. But that's not the end of the scene because oh ho 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 ho, that would be too easy. So I skipped over it because it was really minor, but during the hunt, Shion found a baby with a dead mother and grabbed it, wrapping it in its coat and entrusting it to one of Inukashi's dogs that was nearby. Novel Inukashi is reasonably upset upon receiving a baby and starts planning on dumping it back on Shion as soon as he gets out of the correctional facility. But they end up having an entire arc where they begin to love and care for, they begin to protect the child, and would absolutely never give it away to anyone else. And there's like multiple chapters dedicated to this. The anime doesn't cut the baby, but it does cut Inukashi's entire arc that revolves around it. So, in the final minute of the show, the dog that was entrusted with the baby comes and gives it back to Shion. What? Like, the majority of the reason the kid exists at all is for Inukashi's character arc. If Inukashi doesn't love the baby, then the baby should have just been cut from the story entirely. The baby serves no purpose anymore, other than Shion caring about other people in times of need, which was already one of the only character traits that the anime did establish effectively. And we're still not done. With about 45 seconds left on the clock, Shion pulls the chip that Vu gave him out of his pocket. And then he looks at it, and drops it on the ground, and then crushes it with his foot. Excuse me? Shion got handed an answer to so many questions. It has all the answers to the history of number 6, the founding, whatever is up with that Eliarius Godwasp thing, and he crushes it with his foot. Not only is that insanely out of character for Shion, someone who tries learning so hard all the time and values knowledge so much that it's one of the main themes in the story, it's also insanely irresponsible. Even if Shion doesn't care about the information, which I don't believe for a second, this information is important to, like, the government and history. This literally has evidence of number 6 committing a genocide against the forest people. Shion, that's pretty important. This is a bad decision in so many ways. Whatever. I have one more thing to say. Shion is the one that says they'll reunite. I must ask, how do you know this? Why do you believe Desmi will return? You have no evidence to back up this claim. It's just because the writers realized everyone would be really sad if they thought the characters would never see each other again. And that is the end of number 6, 2011. Wait, never mind, I have one more thing. So Nezumi takes 2 of the mice with him, and one of them stays with Shion. In the novel, it's Tsukiyo, the black mouse that stays with Shion. But in the anime, they decide to make it Hamlet. I guess I forgot to mention the names of Nezumi's 3 mice. They don't start out with names, but Shion gives them to them. They're Hamlet, Kuzat, and Tsukiyo. And that's also the order about how much I care about each of them. And that is the end of number 6, 2011. By now, you should know what my biggest gripes with the anime are. The poor character writing and the rushed story. So I'd like to talk about something else in these final few minutes. Number 6 by Asano Tsuko means something to me. It means a lot to me. It spoke to me, and it had something to tell me. It had something to say, and it still has something to say. As of May 28th, 2025, a new book series by Asano Tsuko has begun publishing. Number 6 Reunion. Number 6 Reunion takes place 2 years after the main series, in the ashes of the old Number 6, as everyone works towards not just rebuilding society, but making it better than before. Having equity, honesty, and peace instead of the stratification, censorship, and war that our caste grew up in. It shows the difficulty in cultivating a world that is free of corruption. Asano-sensei still had more to say about the world, and so she decided to say it. You can't destroy the present if you have no vision for the future. You ought not to, because then everyone will be left aimless. Fight not against the present, but for the future. Number 6 says so much about the world. It speaks of war and destruction and terror and inequality and death and corruption and creation and life and beauty and love. It's not like the anime adaptation tells us nothing about the world. It just doesn't say any of it. Number 6, 2011, has nothing to say about war, about death, about corruption, or about love. It's hollow and empty. It's 11 episodes of slick animation and rush plot that makes my blood boil, and says nothing about the world, about politics. But we can still listen to what it tells us. It tells us of production teams forced to rush out a poor quality product so that the higher-ups can make money quicker. It's all about speed, 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 money, money, money. It tells us of someone somewhere in the industry who didn't care about the story they were making, who didn't understand it. It tells us of some people somewhere in the industry who did care and did understand the story they were making, and who made the soundtrack and the art, and those who decided to make Safu a more active character who makes choices. Those who tried to, but ultimately couldn't, make the number 6 anime everything that it could have been. And it tells us of characters rid of their personality and the joy that they bring me. The number 6 anime adaptation lost everything that it had to say in the translation from book to screen. It lost the character arcs and dynamics, it lost the political and social commentary. It lost the plot. It lost everything it had to say and anything I wanted to listen to. Think critically about media. What does it have to say? If it has nothing to say, that's okay. In that case, what can it tell you? Please listen to it. Thank you to all my friends who peer-reviewed this for me. Thank you to all the people who made the posts I put on screen throughout, especially Skunks. Thank you, Skunks. Thank you, Kino Hinoki, for the wonderful manga adaptation. I used some of those images throughout. Thank you to Studio Bones, I suppose. I technically couldn't have made this video if it wasn't for them. Thank you to you for watching, and above all, thank you to Asano Atsuko for creating such a beautiful, thoughtful, and meaningful work of art. It truly means the world to me. Go read number 6, I beg you. I have links in the description. Go read this beautiful series. Even if you don't finish it or don't like it, at least try.